You ready?
Brian, can you help me? For some reason, the packet is not going to that screen. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our tonight's council meeting. For the record, it's June 20th, 2024, and the time is 6:32. I'll begin with the roll call. So council, when I call your name, please say here or present. Mayor Maxton?
Here.
Councilmember Stroop is not present. Councilmember Roden?
Here.
Olvera?
Here.
Kerner?
Here.
Parker?
Here.
And Menchow is not present. With 5 members of council present, a quorum is declared.
Thank you, Christina. Would everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. And thanks everybody for attending tonight's council meeting. As a reminder for everybody that's here, we do live broadcast the meeting and would like to welcome all those that are joining us as part of the live broadcast. And also for those that are here in the room, if you do get an opportunity to speak tonight, I'd ask that you use the microphone that's at the podium up here. If you speak from your seats, those that are on the live broadcast cannot hear the comments from your chair. But if you speak from the mic, they'll be able to hear the comments. And if you do get an opportunity to speak, I'd ask that you introduce yourself and state if you're a Fair Oaks Ranch resident or not. If not, then what county you're from. And if you're from some agency, just your name and what agency you're from. All right. We have 3 individuals that signed up tonight to speak as part of Citizens to be Heard. 2 of them signed up to speak about an item that's on the agenda. And Ms. Graham, you want to wait until the agenda item? No, it's too late to And Mr. Brower also. Did you want to wait or? It's next to last. It'll be somewhere around 9:30 or 10 o'clock. Okay. We'll start off with Ms. Graham then.
Christine Graham, Sutterfeld Estates. Thank you, Mayor and City Council, for the opportunity to speak on tonight's agenda on the closing of Noble Lark. As a home rule city, I understand in accordance with Chapter 311 of the Transportation Code, you may close this road, and I don't have an issue with that. However, I would ask that you take into consideration the following items. The ability of fire or EMS to respond to an emergency may be impeded and they may not have the turnaround or passing space needed. Closing Noble Lark essentially makes this a cul-de-sac. The UDC has restrictions for the length of a street that ends in a cul-de-sac, as well as turnaround circumvent, never mind. I believe the street would not meet our UDC requirements. You will be removing a public right-of-way. The Home Rule Charter, Section 708, property not exempt from special assessments, gives you the ability to charge the homeowners who are benefiting from the closing of Noble Lark and I would hope you would seriously consider assessing Noble Lark residents and not expect the rest of the city residents to foot the bill for this closure. And with all due respect, I would ask that Councilman Olvera recuse himself from any vote on the closing of Noble Lark, as his residence is on this street. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Brimhall.
Good evening, City Council and staff. I am speaking to y'all today, once again, regarding the Civic Center construction project using MDD tax funds. Quoting a letter from former Center Manager Tobin Maples to the former MDD board dated July 15th, 2020. The purpose of my letter is to request funding support for the construction of a Civic Center building. The requested level of support is estimated at $600,000. I dare to suggest that in July of 2020, most residents were not aware of the city's request for use of MDD funds. Regardless that the Civic Center issue was occasionally on random council agendas over the subsequent 3.5 years, as far as I can tell, the first time that the city government actually invited all residents' input on the issue was at the town hall meeting held on February 27th, 2024. I am still stunned that the town hall meeting was not for residents' benefit at all. Your presentation at that meeting was, here's what we, your city government, is going to build. Which design do you prefer? And oh, by the way, the cost is approximately $2.3 million. We appreciate that y'all finally put a survey online for all residents' participation, but believe that it was slightly flawed because there was no question about whether residents even wanted a civic center or not. Considering the city government rhetoric regarding transparency, building community, open communication with residents, et cetera, and considering that the cost of the Civic Center project went from $600,000 to about $2.3 million, I question why y'all did not make any substantial information on the evolution of the Civic Center project available to all city residents for approximately 3.5 years. I suggest that y'all's lack of transparency and substantial communication with residents on this issue suggests that you really don't want residents' participation at all. I suggest this is not the way to enhance a spirit of community amongst residents or between City Hall and residents. On a lighter note, while visiting the City Hall website yesterday, I came across a tab that was under our government called ongoing and upcoming projects. It's wonderful, and I thank y'all for adding such an informative feature to your website. I just might suggest that y'all might want to put a banner up when people sign on to the website so they even know it's there, because the information is wonderful, and I don't know when it was put up, but it should have been done decades ago, as far as I can tell. It's great because it lets people be able to go and see the projects, the progress, the cost. Just a little aside, when I was looking at the graph about the cost on 2 or 3 of the projects, it started at $500K. Okay, 500,000. We got that, right? But then it went to 1,000K, and I'm going, what's 1,000K? Then it went to 1,500K. You know, I mean, it was like, I just would suggest you might redo those graphs and just change the K to an M, because you're actually dealing in millions, not hundreds of thousands. It would be 0.5 M, 1 M, 2 M, whatever, and it'll just make it easier to understand. I wasn't looking for that. I go, what's wrong with this graph? What's 1,000K? Well, it would just be helpful if it was actually expressed in millions. And I know I wasn't going to speak on Noble Lark because I don't know anything about the issue, except I do know that it is not generally common sense or a good idea to close city streets. The more ingress and egress that people have within the city and entering and exiting the city is better. I live on the Parkway. It's a pretty busy street. I'm not going to ask y'all to close it off at Dietz Elkhorn. But I do appreciate that I can get out, go into 10, I can get on a Ralph Fair. And the other day, Ralph Fair was backed up. I think it was Monday or Tuesday at the light at Fair Oaks Parkway, just solid cars. They had traffic directors there, which was really nice, but I was glad that it was clear so I could cut through on Noleasi to Dietz and get out to run my errands. Anyway, I'm just saying the more traffic ways there are to get around the city, the better. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And Mr. Brower.
I'm Barry Brower, and Mr. Mayor, Council. My wife and I moved out here in July of 1983 onto Noble Art Drive. And as I look at it today, we have our street back with that closure. We have children back in the street riding bicycles, jogging, walking, as well as families, baby carriages. And before that, after the Robb Elementary opened, it became a zoo over there with traffic early in the mornings and late afternoons. And I can't emphasize enough about the safety of the residents on Calcalo and Noble Art Drive. Yes, I'm all for open roads, but I'm not for an open road that people can't even get out of their driveways at 7:30 in the morning when they're trying to get to schools or to their own place of work. So while I don't have a bunch of notes here, I have a lot of experience here in living on Noble Art Drive. We've got a very diverse population now on Calcalo as well as Noble Ark. Everything from almost newlyweds and young children to some of us more elderly, or as I like to say, a seasoned citizen. And we have just enjoyed, and everybody I talk to that's out walking or riding their bikes, they're saying, we've got our street back. And the only reason for opening that street back up, it's gonna open it right back up to folks coming out of different places to take a shortcut to get to Robb Elementary. That's the only reason they're using it. So I just wanted to alert you all, and I'm not moving. Maybe I need to buy you all out so you can move. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. And thank y'all for being here tonight, and thank all three of y'all for your comments. Appreciate you speaking up. I think it's important. We'll move on to presentations tonight. We do have one presentation, and it's the presentation of a life-saving award. Our police chief, Chief Mooring, is going to do the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. We did plan on having Mrs. Gogler here. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it tonight. But it does not diminish her actions that night, and I'm going to go ahead and read through that as well. Quoting from the citation, with immense pride and gratitude, we'd like to recognize the extraordinary efforts of individuals within our community who have demonstrated unparalleled bravery and dedication. The Fair Oaks Ranch Police Department firmly believes in honoring both officers and civilians for their exemplary service to others and to our community. It is in this spirit that we present the remarkable actions of Mrs. Madison Katie Gogler and Canine Officer David Magnus. On the evening of May 25th, 2024, at approximately 6:13 p.m., officers of the Fair Oaks Ranch Police Department were dispatched to a critical situation at the 8900 block of Fair Oaks Parkway. A male resident has possibly suffered a heart attack and was not breathing. The dispatch later informed the responding officers that the patient's daughter, Ms. Gogler, was courageously performing CPR on her father. Officer David Magnus arrived swiftly at the scene, equipped with the automated external defibrillator, or AED, from his vehicle, and without a moment's hesitation, he rushed inside the residence where he found Ms. Gogler, who had been diligently administering CPR on her father for over 4 minutes. Officer Magnus immediately assessed the situation, applied the AED pads, and activated the device, which indicated a shock was necessary. Officer Magnus delivered the electric shock and then continued with chest compressions. As other officers, EMS, and fire personnel arrived, Officer Magnus maintained his efforts, performing chest compressions for approximately 2 minutes until the AED device detected an active heart rhythm. The gravity of this life-saving effort is affirmed through video evidence and direct testimony from witnesses present that day. It is unequivocal that the swift and decisive actions of Mrs. Katie Gogler and Canine Officer David Magnus were instrumental in saving a human life. In light of their heroic actions, we extend our profound gratitude and this certificate of appreciation to Ms. Madison Katie Gogler for her pivotal role in the life-saving endeavor. And simultaneously, Officer David Magnus is hereby awarded the Fair Oaks Ranch Police Department's Life Saving Award. Finishing up, these commendations not only reflect the gratitude of the Fair Oaks Ranch Police Department, but also the deep appreciation of our entire city. Ms. Gogler and Officer Magnus's actions are a testament to the incredible impact that individuals can have in a time of crisis, and they remind us all of the power of quick thinking, teamwork, and the profound difference each of us can make in the community and the lives of others. Thank you.
Chief, we've handed out multiple life-saving awards over the past years. Come on, everybody get in the picture. Chief, we've handed out multiple life-saving awards over the previous years. And I think as I'm listening to the citation, as you read it off and what happened, one, that we have residents that know life-saving procedures, and I think that speaks a lot. But I think it speaks a lot of you and your police department and our response times to anywhere in the city, and then an officer that arrives with the capabilities to provide life-saving measures. So thank you for what you do for the city and providing that capability to us. And thank you to the officers that follow through on it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we'll move on to our consent agenda tonight. We have 7 items on the consent agenda. First is the approval of the June 4th, 2024 special city council meeting minutes. Second, approval of the June 6th, 2024 regular city council meeting minutes. Third, approval of the second reading of an ordinance for the city council of the city of Fair Oaks Ranch, Texas, amending the comprehensive plan to change the land use classification from rural residential to neighborhood residential for approximately 149 acres, generally located along the north side of Ralph Fair Road and Honeycomb Rock, generally known as Oak Bend Estates. Fourth, approval of a second reading of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, Texas, amending the zoning classification from rural residential to neighborhood residential for 149 acres, generally located along the north side of Ralph Fair Road and Honeycomb Rock, generally known as Oak Bend Estates. Fifth, approval of the second reading of an ordinance amending the budget of the City of Fair Oaks Ranch for fiscal year 2023-24 to fund $10,000 towards the Oak Wilt program. Sixth, approval of a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement with JCM Commercial Services LLC for seal coating. And last, approval of Councilmember Stroop's absence from the June 6th, 2024 regular city council meeting. Is there any council member that would like to take any item from consent and move it to consideration? With that, could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I so move.
From Laura, and a second? Scott beat you. All in favor of approval of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Thank you all. Y'all are welcome to stay. With that, we'll move on to our consideration and discussion items tonight. The first one is the consideration and approval of a resolution by the City Council of the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, Texas, authorizing and approving publication of notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation complying with the requirements contained in Securities and Exchange Commission Rule 115C2-12 and providing an effective date. And we do have a presentation with this for those that are following the packets on page 60.
Yes.
I'll turn it over to Summer.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Summer Fleming, Director of Finance. So I'll start the presentation for this item, and then Grant will present on the capital projects. And I also want to introduce Andrew Friedman, the city's financial advisor from Samco Capital, who's here to answer any specific questions you may have.
Mic is off, I can't hear.
Oh. I can hear you, but people online probably can't.
Yeah, now you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
All right. So where to begin? From the beginning, I suppose.
That'd be a good start.
Okay. All right, Summer Fleming, Director of Finance. I do have the presentation tonight that I'll start, and then Grant will take over and go over the capital improvement projects. And I don't know if you heard, but Andrew Friedman, the city's financial advisor from Samco Capital, is here to answer any questions after the presentation. So for your consideration is a resolution authorizing publication of a notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation, I'll call them COs, for an amount not to exceed $3,985,000 for drainage and utility capital improvement projects. Local Government Code Chapter 271 dictates the process we must go through before issuing COs, and the first step is to post for 2 consecutive weeks in the newspaper, making the public aware of the city's intention to issue the debt. So timing of this notice before you tonight allows for the sale of COs to occur in September for projects in the fiscal year 24-25 proposed capital budget. Now, posting in the paper provides transparency to the public as the issuance is subject to petition by the registered voters of the city. If a petition is submitted by 5% of the qualified voters, then the issuance of COs is paused until a bond election can be called and held. Oh, goodness. That's what I was doing.
Dana, can you just flip the slides until we get it? Okay.
Next slide. So staff is recommending to fund the drainage and utility capital improvement projects through COs. The 5-year drainage CIP includes 11 projects totaling $1.9 million, and the 5-year utility CIP includes 11 projects for a total of $20.8 million. Now, one important benefit of using debt to fund the capital budget is that each generation of taxpayer or utility rate user pays for their use of the capital facilities. These are the capital improvement plans adopted by City Council in fiscal year 21-22, with the addition of 3 new projects recommended by staff that Grant will cover in detail. The CIPs and additional projects have been reviewed by the Bond Advisory Committee, and their final report on the utilities can be found on page 101 of the agenda packet. The proposed funding for these projects uses a combination of cash and debt, with debt issuances financed over 20 years. The CIP uses a phase-in of projects over the 5-year term, and projects with design completed or underway are prioritized over new starts. When we get to the slide with the CIPs, you'll notice that many of the projects have already been started. So available funding sources for the utility include the capital reserve fee and impact fees in addition to debt. Impact fees can only be used for eligible projects, but includes the repayment of debt and interest costs on those projects. COs are the recommended funding source because they allow the city to finance multiple projects with multiple sources of repayment together to create economies of scale and reduce issuance costs. So while the COs are backed by the full taxing authority of the city, which provides for a lower interest rate than, say, revenue bonds, the repayment of debt for water projects would be paid with water revenues, debt for wastewater projects would be paid with wastewater revenues, and the debt for drainage would be funded through an ad valorem tax levy. Other advantages for funding the capital budget with debt is that user fees and tax rates can be maintained at consistent levels, and projects can be built as they're needed rather than delayed until sufficient funds are accumulated. So I'll turn it over to Grant now for the remaining slides to go over the CIP and the new projects.
Hey, Summer, I just had a quick question that really relates. So what we're doing tonight, the resolution is to do the notice of intent. We're approving a resolution so that the notice of intent can be put into the paper.
Yes,
What we're not deciding on is any of the COs or what we're going to fund.
that's correct.
Okay?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Grant Watanabe, the Director of Public Works for the city, and I'm going to start by going over the water CIP projects proposed for the CO bonds. There's a total of 8 projects listed here. 5 are currently in design or underway, and as Summer mentioned before, several of these projects have been funded, at least in terms of design. In the 2023 column, you can see what's been expended in that year and previous, and in the 2024 column, you can see what's budgeted in support of those projects. All of these projects have been presented to the Bond Advisory Committee. Most of these come from the master plan that are included in our approved 5-year CIP. And there are 2 new projects, which I'm also going to cover in more detail, but let me go over each of these briefly, just to recap. Starting at the top is Willow Wind Red Bud Hill Waterline replacement. That design is completed. This project will replace approximately 3,300 linear feet of waterline in the Raintree Woods subdivision or neighborhood area. This is a location where we get frequent breaks 3 or 4 times a year. We get frequent service interruptions to customers there and quite a bit of water loss. The second project on the list is the elevated storage tank. This project is still in the land acquisition phase. Once the site is acquired, we still need to complete and task tailor the design to that specific site. So as you can see, construction is not planned until 2026. The next project is the Rolling Acres Trail Waterline Replacement Project. This project is planned in conjunction with Willow Wind and Red Bud Hill because the nature of the work is very similar. In both cases, we're not increasing capacity or doing any upgrades. We're simply replacing the existing water line in kind. But this segment of water line on Rolling Acres Trail is located between Silver Spur and Wild Oak Hill and is approximately 2,300 linear feet long. It's another location where we have frequent breaks and a lot of water loss. The next project on the list is the Plant 5 ground storage tank. This project will construct a new 500,000 gallon ground storage tank in Plant 5. And the purpose of the project is to improve utility operations and resiliency during periods of high demand and extended power outages. The existing tank on site is 125,000 gallons. It turns over frequently, multiple times per day, and is not capable of meeting our peak demands each summer. One of the key aspects of this project is its strategic location. By placing this ground storage tank at Plant 5, we have the ability to deliver water to basically where it's needed throughout the city. From Plant 5, we can deliver water to Plant 3, which serves the northern area of our city, or we can deliver water to Plant 1, Elmo Davis, which serves the middle portion and the southern portion of our city. The next project on the list is the Old Fredericksburg Waterline Replacement. This is a project that was brought forward. It was originally planned for later in the future, but because Bexar County is currently planning to reconstruct Old Fredericksburg Road, the city decided to bring this project forward so that we wouldn't have to tear up their new road to put in our water line replacement. That is close to being completed in terms of design, and Bexar County is planning to go to bid in the fall if everything works out right. The last two projects are two new projects that the council haven't seen, and I'll start with the first one here. The first one is a SAWS emergency interconnect. This would provide a backup water source for primarily Zone C, which is the southern area of our city. In conversation with SAWS, they made it clear to us that there's statutory limitations which prevent them from delivering water outside of counties that are supported by the Edwards Aquifer Authority. So for us, that means that we can only use SAWS water in the Bexar County area, and thus that means really it's limited to Zone C. But by constructing this emergency interconnect, it improves our resiliency in the event of an extended power outage, and it will also help us provide adequate flow and pressure when needed. The planned location is at the intersection of Fair Oaks Parkway and the IH-10 access road. In the insert map, you can see where our 12-inch water main is located, and it's not too far from SAW's 12-inch water main. That distance is about 250 feet. This project would connect an interconnect main between the two systems, along with a backflow preventer and some type of check valve.
This work the other way. I heard you say backflow preventer, so maybe not. In the case where maybe SAWS goes down in the neighborhood in our city, would we be able to provide water to those residents through our system and this emergency
That's not the
interconnect?
intent of the project, and the only way that would happen is if we, I guess, allowed it to happen. Right now,
That's what I'm asking. I mean,
right.
could it be used for that? I mean, it's not that it hasn't happened before. It has. It happened just 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I can't remember now. At some point, there was a winter storm, so I was just curious if that's.
I guess theoretically that's possible.
Okay.
But SAWS customers is much larger utility, and they drain our utility pretty quick since we're much smaller.
Not the ones, well, I'm talking about the ones in Fair Oaks Ranch. So, but it's not prohibited from this connection, it's just not the intention. Is that what you're saying?
That's not the intention.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and the next proposed new project is a new or replacement ground storage tank at plant number 4. So So the existing tank is about 40 years old. It's about 22,000 gallons, and you can kind of see it in the background at Plant 4. It's quite old. It's quite degraded in poor condition. It's time for replacement, and what we'd like to do is replace it with a larger tank. What that allows us to do is to take advantage of some of the best producing wells that the city has right now. Because of the small size of that tank, those wells often cycle on and off. By having a larger tank, that'll happen less frequently, and we can use it to support as well Zone C throughout our city. This is also the location where we've constructed and installed an emergency generator. So this plant is ready to serve the city in terms of in the event of an extended power outage. All right, if there's no questions on the water bond projects, I'll move on to the wastewater CIP bond projects. And for those, there's only 3 listed here. One is currently in design, and that's the wastewater treatment plant expansion, phase 1. Again, that first phase of expansion is gonna address our effluent pump station and conveyance system all the way out to the holding ponds on the golf course. It's gonna address the bottom of the hill lift station deficiencies, as well as some of the odor control measures at the headworks. The second project you see there is also one that's in our master plan and our approved CIP. It's a project to install a sewer line and decommission our Falls lift station. The Falls lift station is one of the more problematic lift stations in our system. It is also located in floodplain, so during storm events, that lift station is often inundated. And Brandon, our wastewater supervisor, was telling me a story where we did have a storm event, and he had a huge tree trunk come through that lift station and almost take out the electrical panels. So we came fairly close to having a spill during that event. So what this project does is not only decommission the lift station, but build an underground gravity main. That gravity main would run through the golf course and connect to other portions of our system near battle intents. And the third project on this list is, again, a new project that you haven't seen yet. This one is called the Kojak Circle Manhole and Sewer Upgrade. This project would upsize the manhole at Kojak Circle, as well as the conveyance pipeline between that manhole and the wastewater treatment plant. You can kind of see in the inset map that existing main is a 6-inch main, but what's causing it really issues is that all of the mains that are feeding this segment of the system, we can see in red a force main coming down from Setterfield. So all of the flow from Setterfield comes through this main. We also have all the flow from the Arbors. The Arbors has a 15-inch main coming into this area. We also have two 8-inch mains, one from Kojak Circle and one from Anole Ase. So all of this wastewater is from 15-inch mains to 8-inch mains, from force mains, is all trying to get through a 6-inch main. So we haven't designed it yet, but I imagine it'd be something much larger, possibly a 10 to 12-inch main. Right. All right, so in addition to the projects I just mentioned, there were other projects that are also included in our 5-year CIP. Right now, staff is not recommending that those be funded through the issuance of CO bonds. As an alternative, the staff is recommending that several of them be funded through our operational budget. They include some well electrical upgrades as well as some lift station upgrades. Just to give you a good example, the school lift station right now is down, but it's running on an e-pump, and we're replacing the electrical control panel right now. That was a small $24,000 project that we funded through our maintenance budget. And the intent here is to, as other components fail at our lift stations, to continue to address those through our regular and normal maintenance budget. Some other projects that were in the CIP, which we're not recommending for funding through the CO bonds, include the Emil Davis ground storage tanks 1 and 2 rehab. All of our we have seven ground storage tanks, and basically all are past due for rehab, recoating, cleaning, inspecting. What we'd like to do as an alternative is to enter into a long-term tank maintenance plan. This plan could be 10, 15, 20 years with a vendor that specializes in this area. And they would provide all of the services needed to keep these tanks in operation and compliant with TCEQ requirements. The benefit is that we pay the same amount over the 10-year term or the 15-year term, so that same amount could be included in our operational budget instead of putting together larger CIP projects to address each tank individually. And then lastly, there were 2 projects that were, again, in our approved 5-year CIP that we don't believe is needed at this time because of upgrades elsewhere. This includes another upgrade, or an upgrade to Emil Davis to support Zone C. If you remember, maybe 2 years ago, we did a new hydropneumatic and pump VFD upgrade over at Plant 2 that supports Zone C. That upgrade at that time really meets the needs of our water system. And then similarly, the other upgrade at Emil Davis Pump Station, that's to upgrade some backup pumps that are not normally used. The primary pumps have already been upgraded with VFDs at Emil Davis, so we don't believe that project is needed at this time as well. All right, so what's the impact to our water and wastewater customers? And what's shown here is a really conservative estimate. This assumes that all of the projects that I've presented are supported and that all 3 CO tranches are approved. It also assumes a very conservative growth projection. You can see this year, we're maybe adding, just based on this, 10, 15, 20 connections per year. In actuality, if those number of connections are higher, then the debt service fee should be lower because it's a larger denominator. But as you can see on the water side, it's an increase from $7.33 in 2024 to about $24 starting in 2025. And then for wastewater customers, it's an increase from $2.26 in 2024 to about $17.33 in 2025.
Grant, are these fees just solely tied to the 3.9 million?
This is for not only the 3.9 million, but the total 18 million, 20 million for all of the projects.
Okay. So you're going to cover the others, I guess. Okay.
So the debt service fee shown here is reflective of funding or issuing COs for all of the projects.
But we're only talking about COs right now for 3.9 million of that 18 million, correct? Okay.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
Right. There'll be another notice of intent in future years to address the other
Okay, thank you.
projects, yes.
Grant, could you go back real quick? So, just
Sure.
for clarification, what you just said. So the figures here reflect the total amount or just the 3.9 million?
It's the total amount for all the,
But we're showing collections in 2025 for the total amount.
The debt service schedule has been structured accounting for the entire 5-year CIP with 3 issuances. So the 3 issuances get us to the debt service payment for each year. So 2025 is reflective of just the 3.9 million being issued and paid for. And then I guess it's in, let me see when the second issuance is. in 2025. When's the next one? In 2026. So it is actually already accounted for. The next issuances, the debt payment for those are accounted for in that rate. So that rate is what we would need in each of those years if we continue with the 3 issuances as proposed in the CIP.
So let me ask this question. So for 2025, we have, let's just use the water debt service fee, that 2416. Does that mean in 2026, we add an additional 2423, or it's just a flat
That's what the
amount?
fee would remain.
It
So,
remains?
Yes. In the first issuance, to make our debt service payment on that $3.8 million, we're able to set what the annual payment is going to be each year. So we set that at a rate taking into account the entire CIP structure so that we can have a stable rate in the whole term of the bond issuances.
Even though we haven't issued the other 15 million in COs?
Right, you haven't, and we wouldn't be paying on any debt for future issuances. That's just the debt payment for the first issuance that we've structured to pay more upfront.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
May I add something? Andrew Friedman, Samco Capital Markets, financial advisor to the city. One of the facets of this that maybe gets a little bit lost in this is you already have debt that is existing and paid for from your water and sewer rates. We are about to pay off that debt over the next few years. So this is a factor of layering in new debt that's taking its place, that's building and maintaining that $24 rate, for instance, on the water side. We're building up to that. We're layering in these other subsequent bond issues as that debt is also going away, and that's how we're able to maintain that $24 increase over the multiple years as we issue new debt. If you were to not issue the debt in 2025 and 2026, that $24 would in all likelihood be coming down.
Okay. So we can do it that way? I mean, we can have these bonds not issued, but we can still increase our rate to that?
You can, yeah, absolutely.
Is that the plan? Is that the thinking?
As you all go through the budget every year, you're looking at your water and sewer rates, setting them appropriately to cover the operations
Right.
and the capital needs of the city. So that changes every year. So in theory, you could be increasing these beyond that. If your operational expenses are much higher 2 years down the line, they could be coming down if you all opt not to issue the subsequent issues of certificates of obligation for these projects.
So let me say it a different way. I mean, understand that rate, if we started in 2025, carried it out, would cover whatever is in the 3 issuances, correct? But typically, when you issue debt, don't you, your debt, our first 3.9 million is not going to cost us $24.16 a month. It's going to cost us something less, and when you add the another whatever millions, your rate would go up, correct? Or are we trying to flatten it out over the whole period so that even though we haven't issued the debt, we haven't approved to do it, we're going to go ahead and have that rate flat, even though it's not yet been issued and we're not yet incurring any expense?
Off the other one sooner.
We were trying to, yes, stabilize the rate so that we wouldn't have a fluctuation each time we made an issuance, but the rate would still only be paying for that debt issuance. We've been able to structure the debt payment for that one issuance a little bit higher in the first year to allow us to have a more stable rate that's consistent throughout the entire term. So that way you don't have high fluctuations of increasing 1 month or 1 year, only $10, and the next year might go up another $20 and then back down $14. We were trying to maintain a consistent rate over the term.
So you're paying down the earlier debt at a different term than you are the later debt, so that the rate stays the same. Okay, I understand
And
that.
one of the ancillary benefits of doing that is consider front-loading that debt, meaning you're paying off more of that principal sooner. You're saving on the long-term interest
Sure.
cost by doing so.
Okay. That helps, thank you. That's the same for the wastewater too, correct? Same concept, okay.
All right, if there's no further questions on this slide, I'll move on to the drainage projects.
I have one
Yes, sir.
question. Which of the 6 water projects are included in this first issuance? Because on the slide, there's more than 6. Well, maybe I'm not following.
I had the same question.
Okay.
So,
So maybe if I can go back to the water. There we go. So the first issuance is going to happen, tranche is going to happen in 2025. You can see the 6 projects listed there.
Oh, not the last 2?
But I believe some of them are cash funded as well, right?
Yes, this plan does take into account some cash funding. I know historically we've cash funded some smaller amounts of design. So the upgrade electrical at plant number 3 is cash funded, as well as the $30,000 SAWS emergency interconnect. So in the first issuance for the utility, it's a total of $3.735 million, which is those projects less that upgrade and the SAWS interconnect, and then $650,000 for the wastewater.
So all of the projects we see in the screen are included one way or the other, whether it's cash or through the issuance?
If they have an amount in the 2025 column, yes.
Okay.
and that's the debt, the 2025 is going to be covered by the debt, by the CO.
Yes, minus those last 2, the 74,
Sure.
419, and 30,000.
Yeah, except for whatever cash fund.
That's right.
And the same for this this other one you had here, wastewater. The 650,
Yes,
which is new, not in the CIP currently.
that is a new recommended project, yes.
Okay.
In summer, when we do the certificates of obligation, I don't fully understand how they work, but I know we're taking the debt in relation to the water projects specifically, so that water revenues would be to pay it off, and then also the same for wastewater, so that they're not intermingled.
That's right.
Because we have water customers who are not wastewater customers.
Yes, we know exactly how much debt is funding the water projects, wastewater projects, and the CO is including drainage too. So we have all 3 of those that are being funded by their own revenue sources.
And I understand the process of what you're going through, and really it gets back to the question for me is that, you know, which projects are we going to look at? And we'll determine that later as part of the budget cycle that we're going to go through this year, which then would really determine the amount of debt. But the concern as I read this is right now we're looking at an increase of $31.90 a month for individuals who are on water and wastewater. That's a pretty significant increase. And that just includes the debt financing as part of the utility bill. Concern
is
for
what
me,
the
and I'm just
scenario
putting it out
shows.
there, I take note of that that's a big jump for me.
It is a big jump, and as you're going through, and we'll talk about these again when we have our capital improvements plan workshop next month, but without taking out the calculator, you can see what the driver of most of those are. So on the water side, you have the elevated storage tank. On the sewer side, you have obviously the wastewater plant improvements. That's probably 70% of it or better right there.
Okay. Thanks, Summer.
Okay, moving on to the drainage bond projects that are proposed. There's a total of 11. In 2025, the proposal here is to fund 3 of them. Those include 2 projects on Rolling Acres Trail and 1 at the Vestal Park Culvert. In general, Almost all of these projects are maintenance related, whether they're replacing and upsiding driveway culverts, cleaning out existing bar ditches, clearing out existing drainage easements. But the first that are being focused on in 2025 are the two on Rolling Acres Trail. And the third, Vestal Park Culvert, again, this is one that was recommended by the Bond Advisory Committee as well. The bottom of the culvert is basically rusted through. The intent of this project is to replace that existing culvert with a reinforced concrete pipe to avoid future issues like this going forward. There are some new projects that are proposed toward the bottom of the list. One of them is included at the Battle Intense Low Water Crossing location. Previous proposals included constructing some sort of bridge structure. What the Bond Advisory Committee recommended was to install a second halt system at that location instead.
Grant, or maybe Summer, so the 294 that's on that previous slide, that would be part of that CO right now. I mean, we haven't made all of its final decisions, but that's the idea. So who pays for that 294? The water and wastewater, the city pays for this one?
Yes, that would be part of
So
the
we-
INS rate.
We split it out
Yes,
and allocate it accordingly? Okay,
right.
all right,
This would be a part of our general fund
right.
determination as part of our budget for this year.
It would be, and it would increase the INS rate of the tax rate to cover that portion of the debt.
Okay.
All right.
In summary, the first tranche, or the certificate of obligation bonds proposed for 2024 to 25, includes 6 water CIP projects. Of those, 4 were debt funded and 2 designs were cash funded for a total of $3.08 million. There's 1 wastewater CIP project for $650,000. There's 3 drainage CIP projects for $249,000. And again, the total combined debt issuance proposed is $3.985 million. Looking at the Bond Advisory Committee recommendations, they did provide their report that included all of the proposed and listed bond drainage projects shown throughout the previous slides, as well as the water and wastewater CIP projects listed on the previous slides. And with that, Mayor,
Other
we're going to
questions?
take any questions.
Questions from anyone here tonight? So what we're looking at is the resolution tonight is really just to approve to move forward with the notification. And then all the projects that were identified as part of this will all be addressed as part of our budget process. Bless you. As part of the budget process we'll go through later this year. So with that, any other questions? Nope,
Mr. Mayor, if I could,
of course.
2 minutes of your time. I did want to reiterate to you all everything, and Summer did a fantastic job of going over what these COs are, and certainly Grant with the projects. The timing for the issuance of these COs is also being managed with the timing of the issuance of the general obligation bonds that were authorized by the voters. And so I wanted to set expectations with you all for those next steps. Both of these obligations need to be sold prior to the adoption of your tax rate, hence the timing that's brought us here to this evening. 46 days after the publication of that notice of intent, The city council is then in a position to entertain bids and authorize the sale of the COs. And so we are targeting a date of September 5th, your council meeting, to bring bond pricing, actually go to market, take competitive bids, and bring those to you at that time for your consideration and approval, assuming that you all award the sale of those bonds and those COs. They would be calculated within your tax rate for the coming year because you make your first payment on either the bonds or the COs February of 2025 after you've received the bulk of your property tax collections. Obviously, the COs that are utility supported are coming from utility revenue and the tax portion from that. So wanted you all to be aware of that timing. We'll go through a bond rating process. The city enjoys a AA plus credit rating, helps us to keep our borrowing costs as low as possible, and being able to combine all of these projects into the COs certainly brings some additional efficiencies there. So happy to answer any questions that you have regarding the timing of that.
Why are we driven to issue the bonds or in September?
So you have to, it all comes down to setting your tax rate and what's known as truth in taxation. You are not allowed to set an anticipatory tax rate, meaning that we have to have sold the bonds before you levy or before you adopt that tax rate and levy it against the taxpayer. So that drives the timing for both the bonds and the COs.
Thanks, sir.
You're very welcome.
Any other questions, comments? I think I get a motion that the city council adopt a resolution authorizing and approving a publication of notice of intent to issue certificates of obligation.
So move.
Keith, in a second. Emily, any other council discussion? All in favor of the motion on the table, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you all. That will move on to our second consideration item tonight, which is the consideration and possible action approving a resolution supporting proposed policy amendments to the Unified Development Code and to the Mixed-Use Village District residential component, and directing the city manager to schedule public hearings on proposed amendments. And this consideration item also has a presentation that is on page 106 of the council packet. Grant?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. So before I get started, you should have a copy of the resolution. It was not included in the agenda packet, but I believe we provided it as a handout. What this resolution does is three things. The first, it states support for 9 UDC policy amendments. These were amendments that we reviewed during a workshop back on April 4th. They included establishing requirements or improving requirements related to cul-de-sacs, easement width, overhang easements, easement instructions, transitional shrub standards, drive-in facilities, infrastructure construction process, street base and pavement standards, and stormwater design criteria. There were other proposed amendments in addition to these, but several were not supported and several needed additional information, and those are not included as part of this resolution. The second thing that this resolution does is state support for a change to the mixed-use residential component. The proposed change is shown as Exhibit A in the agenda packet. As part of Exhibit A, it places a footnote and an asterisk next to some specific residential components, which I'll go over as part of the presentation. And then the last thing that this resolution does is to direct the city manager to schedule a public hearing for these UDC policy amendments, including the change to the mixed-use residential component. So, I know there's been a lot of discussion on mixed use and specifically the residential component, so I'm hoping this presentation will help you make a more informed decision. As part of the agenda for this presentation, I'll be covering the definition of mixed use. Again, the four different types of residential components, the different mixed-use village parcels that are located within our city. I'll talk about the LUEs and the CCN obligations, and then some of the specific development requirements for mixed-use village, talking about building placement and setbacks, some of the landscaping requirements, the parking requirements, impervious cover requirements, all associated with a mixed-use village parcel. And then lastly, I'll wrap up with two development examples for mixed use before taking any questions. Oops. So first of all, the definition and intent of mixed-use village, and this comes from our comprehensive plan in chapter 5.3, and it states, the mixed-use village district indicates areas within the city of Fair Oaks Ranch where the city encourages a mixture of uses that creates pedestrian-scale development at major transportation nodes. It also states that the city encourages development in this area to generally conform to hill country design aesthetic, similar to the materials and massing found in downtown commercial districts like in Bernie, Comfort, and Fredericksburg. Our UDC also includes a permitted use table, specifically table 4.2, which lists all the permitted uses within each of the zoning districts. Specifically for mixed use, there are 4 allowed residential components with no restrictions on density so long as the other mixed use development requirements are met. Those include single-family residential, accessory building residential units or garage apartments, single-family residential attached, townhomes, patio homes, duplexes, or multi-unit homes, and lastly, multifamily residential. And this slide shows both our zoning map and our flume. Looking at the zoning map, we can see 4 primary locations where we have mixed-use village designations. The first is along IH-10 and the Parkway, kind of close to where Frost Bank is located. The second is off of Deeds Elkhorn. There's a small 4-acre parcel next to Elkhorn Ridge. The third is at the intersection of Ralph Fair Road and Deeds Elkhorn Road, kind of behind Fisher's where that Botanica development was proposed. And then lastly, farther north on Ralph Fair Road where Mr. Minahan's property is located. So looking at a comparison between our zoning map and our flume, you can see the city envisions additional mixed-use parcels along Old Fredericksburg Road, so potentially those parcels could be rezoned as mixed use. And the only other difference I see is Mr. Minahan's property where he could potentially rezone to mixed use for all 40 acres as well. So those are the primary differences I see. So most folks are kind of familiar with service units and LUEs, and I wanted to provide a quick overview here so we're kind of all on the same page. So service units are kind of like connections, or if you think meters. The definition comes out of our ordinance, but it says it's a standard measure of consumption, use, generation, or discharge attributed to an individual unit of development. So my takeaway, I understand that to be a connection. You can see the insert map to the right. That's taken out of our water and wastewater master plan, and it does include, and it shows our future projected connections throughout the city, not only at build-out, but at several phases leading up to build-out as well. And that allows the utility and the city to properly plan for future infrastructure.
Brent, where are we at today? Ballpark, I mean, I don't need
In terms of connections?
connections, yeah.
On the water side, we're a little over 3,200 connections, and on the wastewater side, we're a little over 2,000 connections. So if service units are a connection, then LUEs That forms the basis of equivalency between different types of connections. So, for example, if you have a 3/4 inch water meter which serves a single family home, that's considered that connection is 1 LUE. Now, if you have a larger meter, for example, and I'm kind of referring to that inset chart toward the bottom, but if you have a larger meter, say a 1-inch meter, that counts as 1.6 LUEs because it serves more than just a single family home. Similarly, if you have a 2-inch meter, that counts as 6.4 LUEs. And these LUEs also serve as the basis for assessing impact fees. So if you have an applicant that wants a 2-inch meter, they're going to pay 6.4 times the standard impact fee. So moving on to CCN. CCN stands for Certificate of Convenience and Necessity. It's a state-issued monopoly for a specific geographic area in which the utility is obligated to provide continuous and adequate service to every applicant that requests service in that area. So I know there's been a little bit confusion, thinking that we can try and limit or maybe control future growth with LUEs. So that's not necessarily the case. We can control future growth through zoning and proper development regulations, but the LUEs or the future connections that we have in our master plan are specifically that, just for planning purposes. I also want to mention that CCNs are approved by the Public Utility Commission, and they enable utilities to properly plan, again, to manage infrastructure without competition from other service providers. Moving on to the specific development requirements for a mixed-use village. These include, and starting at the top, building placement and setbacks. So again, the purpose of mixed-use village is to promote pedestrian-friendly development. So the setbacks are purposely small. Just looking at the inset graphic to the right, you can see for a mixed-use village parcel on a primary frontage, you have 0 minimum setback up to a 20-foot maximum setback. So we really want that building close to the right-of-way. Similarly, for a secondary frontage, that setback is a 10-foot minimum to, again, 20-foot maximum. So again, we want to place the buildings close to the right-of-way so that pedestrians can walk to and from some of these developments. When it comes to building height, for mixed-use village, the maximum is 3 stories or 45 feet. When it comes to parking, because the buildings are situated to the front of the property, for the most part, the parking is behind the facilities, or in the case where there is no facility fronting the road, that parking lot must be at least 6 foot from the boundary line. For mixed-use village landscaping, a minimum of 25% landscaping is required, and a maximum of 80% impervious cover applies. When it comes to residential transition, and this is where you have a mixed-use parcel next to a residential property, there is a residential transition buffer. This includes a 10-foot setback, and from 10 to 25 feet, the maximum in that location is two stories or 30 feet. So it provides some sort of transition either away or towards the residential property. And then lastly, the standard tree preservation requirements apply. Yes, ma'am.
Out of what you said, are any of those things changing from what is in our current UDC, or is this what is already in our UDC?
This is all what's already in our UDC.
Okay, so this is not a change. This is just a summary of what's in the UDC.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
So the next thing I wanted to do is provide 2 examples of mixed-use development. The first was the botanical development. just behind Fishers along Ralph Fair Road. This development did meet our mixed-use development requirements. It was set back 20 feet from Ralph Fair Road to meet the setback requirement. All of the facilities you see here were 2-story facilities, so they're less than 3 stories, so they met that requirement. All of the parking was behind buildings, or more than 6 foot if there was no buildings. Landscaping was greater than 25%, and the impervious cover was less than 80%. So the other example that I'd like to provide is the Napa Ocos apartment, and I believe with certain site plan adjustments, this mixed-use development could also meet all of our development requirements. As it sits now, some of those proposed apartment buildings are probably farther than 20 feet from the access road, but if those apartments were moved a little closer, it would meet that requirement. I believe all of the Napa Oaks apartments are 3 stories, so they meet that requirement. Much of the parking on the access road side could be moved behind on the other side of the building to meet that requirement if this was within our city. And in order to meet the landscaping requirement, I believe there's some sort of drainage easement between the apartments and the Napa Oaks homes. Depending on how much of that belongs to the apartment parcel or property, they could potentially meet the 25% landscaping and also the 80% impervious cover. So again, I believe with some site plan adjustments, something similar to Napa Oaks apartment could be developed on our mixed-use parcels.
Grant, why do we have the Napa Oaks as an example? That's not mixed use. I mean, they don't have businesses in there. Why is that an example?
Just because multifamily has been a point of discussion in the past, and I just wanted to put it out there as a potential example.
So what Grant is trying to go through here is again, review everyone what the requirements of the mixed-use village are. When we have this discussion, I believe it was in April, there were a lot of questions about could LUEs or setbacks or transition areas or parking, any of those effectively exclude a multifamily development. So what Grant is saying is essentially not necessarily. So he's providing this just as an example of something that could meet our code with certain modifications.
All right, that was the end of my presentation. I'll take any questions or, yes, ma'am.
So I make sure what we're voting on here today is this is a resolution solidifying council guidance to staff to move forward to adjust the UDC for this mixed-use development. Without our solidification, P&Z won't look at this section. Is that correct?
And they could, but what I'm asking and what this does is direct me to go back to the P&Z and ultimately the council and schedule public hearings to incorporate those other policy items we talked about, and yes, to incorporate a mixed-use village amendment that looks like Exhibit A. So you are effectively
not briefed,
directing me to
Exhibit
do
A.
that.
Okay,
Yes.
so Exhibit A wasn't brief, but that's what it would look like.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Which is essentially a 30% cap
Correct.
on
residential.
residential.
Not all residential, though, right? Because we have those little caveats. We have asterisks. and
As it says, on multifamily residential.
That's
Thank you.
right, yeah,
Townhomes.
and townhomes.
But I guess that, I know at the last meeting, or at that meeting, we talked about, since the 4th category, single-family, townhome, patio home, duplex, those all can be so different. Was there ever any discussion to break that category up, or no?
The P&Z recommendation you heard in April had an asterisk on all 4 of those residential caps. So as was originally recommended, all residential would have been capped at 30%. Discussion at this body, the discussion was whether to essentially permit single family by right, which is what this draft does, and limit multifamily.
And if we don't move forward with it, the risk is we could have something similar to Napa Oak at the corner of Fair Oaks Parkway and Dietz Elkhorn across over there in that area.
That's why
At
he
the
was-
Botanica area.
That's why he was given the example. And Napa Oaks was only an example of what could happen and saying that that could be built on the, is it 19 acres?
The worst case, yeah.
Yes.
20 acres, whatever it is, yes.
And do we know, where was the, and maybe this isn't a topic for right now, but the 30%, where was that derived from?
It is derived from a series of examples in other places and also in consultation with our city attorney and the planning staff, his planning staff. That came from the last meeting too. So there's not one omnibus guideline in the universe that dictates what it should be, but it's a reasonable threshold that I think gets to a limitation that we think the body wants, but at the same time not excluding multifamily outright, which we can't.
Well, this is what P and Z recommended us on 2 occasions. And on
No, slightly different.
No,
What the
slightly
P and Z
the
recommended
30%,
was,
the 30%.
but all 4 residential types.
The 30% was,
The
yes.
30% for multifamily is what P and Z recommended to us. And even on the last time when they came in and presented it, I think it was with all 4 categories, could have been, but it was the 30%. And this was based on their going out and reviewing other areas within the city to determine. Bottom line, it comes out as a preference. There's nothing that's going to say, yes, this should be 30%, 40%, or 50%. But it is a recommendation that we did get from P and Z, and then also that we got through the planning section from our lawyer. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Process question. So say we vote yes on this resolution, the next step would be P and Z would have to vote on, do a public hearing and vote on it, and then it would come to us and there'd be a public hearing and we'd vote on it?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And then, not to compound it more.
Okay.
but,
There's probably, I'm sure there's more to
So,
that, yeah.
so that's all the mixed use, and then a while back, we did the 9 items.
That would be in there,
were
too.
forwarded to us, that will all be combined as part of that.
Yes, sir.
So ultimately, there could be 10 items.
That's correct. And
But it would all be in one revision.
one revision, one public hearing, and that is effectively our UDC amendment, probably for the year, for 2024 anyway.
In just those things.
Any other questions? Confused it enough? Any questions from anybody here tonight? Then could I get a motion to approve a resolution regarding the mixed-use village district residential component and directing the city manager to proceed with scheduling public hearings on proposed Unified Development Code amendments?
So move.
Ruben, second.
Second.
Emily, any other discussion from council? Motion on the table, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you all. Thanks, Grant. We'll move on to our third consideration item tonight, which is the consideration and possible action approving a resolution authorizing the execution of an interlocal agreement between the Bernie Independent School District and the City of Fair Oaks Ranch for our school resource officer program.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Here to present the agreement. Some back history. What began as a project under our SAPs in 2020 became active in 2022 when we approved the original agreement with Bernie ISD for 2 school resource officers. The original agreement expired at the end of the school year, and in coordination with Bernie ISD's Dr. Kraft and Safety and Security Director Rich Goodrich, we have this proposed agreement before you tonight. It renews the city's commitment to the safety and security of both of our elementary schools by providing a dedicated officer for each one of the schools. Overall, the agreement mirrors the recently expired one, except for some notable changes. The original agreement was a 2-year agreement. This proposed one will be a 3-year agreement with a progressive percentage increase of costs allocated to the district. So this current upcoming year will be similar to the past two, where it's a 60% to the school district, 40% to the city. The following school year would be a 65%, 35%, and then the third year of the contract would be a 70%, 30%. Outside of that, basic overall functions of the SROs stay the same, and we provide an additional level of security and ease to the parents and staff there. So, yes, sir.
Are those percentages the same across all the different departments that are providing SROs?
Yes. So,
Okay, so Kendall County's not paying less?
yeah, so Dr. Kraft and Rick Goodrich of the school district, they were in communication between our city here, City of Bernie, and Kendall County for all the, I believe, 12 or 13 now campuses for the city, and it's the same agreement across the board, except for some minor differences in off-duty rates of pay for sporting events, things like that, along like Champion and Bernie High School, so which don't really affect our SROs.
Thanks, Chief.
Other questions? Chief, any concerns?
No, sir. We're pretty happy with it. We had our state attorney's office review it. I had both SROs review it. They were pretty good with it. So,
Any questions from anyone here tonight? Then can I get a motion to approve a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign the 3-year agreement with the Bernie Independent School District for 2 school resource officer positions for Fair Oaks Ranch Elementary and Van Robb Elementary School?
So move.
From Ruben and Scott. Any other discussion from council? Motion on the table. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you, Chief.
thank you, Council.
The next item that we have up tonight is the consideration and possible action of approving the first reading of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fair Oaks Ranch, Texas, establishing a Transportation Safety Advisory Committee, amending the city's Code of Ordinances, Chapter 1, Article 1.08, Boards, Commissions, and Committees, providing for severability and repealing clauses and an effective date. Laura, are you going to?
I'll take this one, thank you. Fellow council members, as we discussed, I believe, a couple of meetings ago, I wanted to kind of get guidance on whether you wanted to move forward with this. Many cities have similar citizen advisory committees where they address these transportation safety issues throughout the city. In Exhibit A, you will see some draft committee rules of procedures. Those would come back to us after, if we approve this ordinance, those will come back to us. I wanted to share with you the draft that Carol put up. Thank you very much, Carol. It was really kind of based off of the P&Z one, but to give you an idea of the scope of what the committee would take care of, so in case you had any specific questions. But in general, this ordinance would basically create the standing committee. It would make up 5 regular members that are residents and 2 alternates. They would follow the normal boards and commissions appointment process that we would follow with our normal cycle. And their terms would be 2 years staggered, which will be consistent with our other boards. Again, all must be residents of the city of Fair Oaks Ranch. And the city manager will also have staff on the committee as non-voting members, particularly from public safety and public works, to give it advice and guidance to the residents, I guess, related to, you know, the constraints that we have within the city and what we can and cannot do. Really, the purpose and the duties of the committee would include but not limited to improving the city's quality of life through a citizen government partnership that provides transportation safety. It reviews safety issues submitted to them through citizens and or by city staff. So this would be the first place that citizens would go to with the concerns that they have, say speeding, crosswalk issues, school bus issues, stuff like that. They would come to this committee first, and that committee would provide recommendations to city council with respect to city-owned roadways, walks, paths, and regarding parking zones, yields, stop signs, speed limit increases, hike and bike lanes. Again, the decision would still be with the city council. It would just come through the citizen committee and what their advice would be. So if you would take a look, it kind of lays that out. This ordinance would be establishing this committee, and you'll see on Exhibit A would give you that small little verbiage of what that committee would do. And then if you go into the backup with the rules and procedures, you'll see some of the more details. Those rules and procedures would have to be adopted by us, but I'm not asking for that vote today. I'm just asking for us to consider the ordinance, the first reading of this ordinance. Any questions? Yeah. Oh, okay. All righty. Well, thank you.
Any questions from anyone here tonight?
Alrighty. I think I would like to make the motion if that's
Good.
possible, once I find my page. I move to approve the first reading of an ordinance establishing the Fair Oaks Ranch Transportation Safety Advisory Committee.
Second.
Lee, any other discussion from council? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is approved. Go, Laura.
Thank you.
Everybody doing all right?
Plugging right along.
All right. We'll move on to our workshop items for tonight. Move on to the workshop items tonight. The first workshop that we have is reference the fiscal 2024-25 general fund department budget. I'll just turn it over to Summer. We have several presentations as part of this.
We do. Again, Summer Fleming, Director of Finance. So tonight you'll hear from staff on the fiscal year 24-25 proposed budgets for administration, finance, human resources and communications, information technology, and the shared department. So I like to start each budget workshop with a general fund overview, and I'll highlight any changes to the proposed budget from the last workshop. So we did receive updated preliminary values report from Bexar County. No updated reports from Kendall or Comal. The updated value for Bexar County dropped $3.8 million from the April report. So the total change in value from tax year 2023 is now a 9.4% increase. The last workshop it was reported at 9.6. We'll continue receiving updated value reports up until the final certified values on or around July 25th. The last workshop, we included the detailed budget file for all the departments in the general fund and the other governmental funds. So this reflects the changes since that presentation. Most notably, the additional patrol vehicle and public safety was removed from the general fund, and the funds for the Chartwell Lane Drainage Project were removed from the Bond Capital Fund, as there's sufficient budget this year to complete that project. So the general fund expenditures and capital outlay decreased, so the proposed budget now has a surplus of almost $495,000. Again, most of that surplus is in the unallocated portion of fund balance. You'll find the full proposed budget for all the governmental funds and the detail for each department in the agenda packet again, followed by the departmental presentations. So if there's no questions on the overview, we can start with the proposed budget for the administration department on page 181 of the packet. And Carol will be presenting that.
Good evening, Council. Carol Van Zandt, Assistant City Manager, presenting a summary of the proposed 24-25 budget for the Administration Department. Our department consists of 5 positions: a city manager, 2 assistant city managers, and 2 front office City Hall staff members. The proposed budget totals $920,813, reflecting a 2% increase from this fiscal year's budget. As seen on this slide, the bulk of our expenses is personnel. The services category at 15% accounts for professional services, association dues, meetings, seminars, and training. Our department is funded by 79% by the general fund, while the utility fund provides 21% funding. This is just a graph showing the changes, and as you can see, services has gone up slightly, which is what the 2% is. And that is due to our continued legal needs. The legal expense is increasing $20,000 next year. And that is my quick summary. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, or I will turn it over to Human Resource and Communications now. Appreciate it.
Carol, anything specific that drove the increase in cost in the legal fees?
No, just we wanted to make sure we have a covered amount, as we don't know items that are coming up next year. And the legal, every year we seem to have a little bit more legal needs, so we wanted to ensure we had the funds.
That budget's been flat, or the same
Yeah.
budget amount for a number of years. Trend over time.
All right. Good evening, Council. Joanna Merrill, Director of Human Resources and Communications. And we are going to do our brief summary over our portion of the budget this year. So currently, our budget is, as far as FTEs goes, is 4 positions. That's what we're proposing. Currently, we have 1 director, 1 generalist, and 1 communications specialist that are in that. And in this budget, we are proposing for the addition of 1 new FTE, which is a communications manager. As you can tell from the budget categories, most of the department's budget is towards personnel. 26% of that are for services, and then less than 1% is between operational, supplies, and maintenance. Changes to the budget this year are, again, mostly due to the request for the proposed communications manager FTE, so you can see the differences in personnel. But overall, we don't have many items that we're requesting outside of that. The highlights from this budget, again, do include the FTE for the communications manager, a new citizen engagement platform. There is going to be a decrease due to a change in the HRIS software that we've discussed previously. And then this does include the cost for $50,000 for the compensation study that we are proposing that we implement in the upcoming year, and $10,000 for updating the employee handbook through a vendor. So the citizen engagement platform is part of the communications department. And what this platform essentially will do for us is help us to gain feedback regarding community engagement. It is very difficult through the platforms that we currently have to obtain. And so the goal with this particular platform is to overcome that challenge by diversifying and broadening our ability to obtain data through a multitude of different sources and platforms that some of the 2 of the vendors that we're looking at can currently provide. So essentially, it is a combination of different services where we could utilize overall community surveys, smaller polling surveys. This particular platforms that we're looking at will also provide us the ability to run multiple engagement platforms, an ability to have a dashboard where we can track residential feedback, engagement, reach, scope, and sentiment through some of those areas as well. It also will provide an unlimited template for different polling surveys and things like that that we can draw from for different areas regarding local government concerns. And then it also has vetted questions regarding local government for banks of resources that we can use to help put some of those surveys together, which is definitely a bonus for our team to make sure that we have those questions that are vetted and they're worded right and correctly to ensure that we're getting the feedback that we need regarding different projects. Some other things that it might do as well is that it has the ability to connect not only our social media platforms, but our local media resources as well. It will comb through all of the publicly available online information to find the feedback that residents are providing organically out there on different platforms and provide it into an easily digestible dashboard for us, where it will be able to provide alerts and notifications as soon as things are happening in real time so that we can get ahead of some of the comments and trends that might be out in the community that maybe we haven't even heard of yet, but they're trending out there somewhere on these public platforms. So we are also hoping to use this platform to provide us with those alerts and then insight reports that will connect to the conversations that we're having here about projects in trend format. You know, how are the things that we're talking about during council meetings trending out in the community? What are those statistical reports looking like? What's the data looking like? Even if they're not commenting on our platforms, it is, with this particular one, it would give us the ability to see what those trends and sentiments are out in the community, even if we're not getting the feedback, again, directly to one of us or to staff.
Joanna's mentioned a lot of the features that go. So these platforms have come a long way in the last few years in terms of, like I said, the social media engagement, micro surveys, but usually at the core of these platforms, it's in most communities, it's referred to as something akin to a citizen satisfaction survey. So that's an annual thing where you're polling the community, a statistically significant poll of the community on all different aspects of our services. So public works, public safety, customer service, billing, et cetera, to trend over time how we're doing in each of those categories and the city quality of life and services overall to trend that. And that's really the primary intent of having a citizen engagement platform. The annual survey is usually the core module. They come with a lot of the other platforms that Joanna mentioned as well. And this was one that was in our strategic communications plan, one of our projects to complete.
So $15,000 covers what? Is it a subscription service? Is it something you have to renew every year? And
sorry.
And is there, like, are we going to be able to see, like, if we approved it for 1 year, which I think $15,000 is a lot of money for this, but is there a way after, if we were to approve it, after a year to see what kind of benefit, if any, we've gotten back from it?
Yes, it is a subscription service. It is. So we have that option every year.
Okay, and at the end of the year, what kind of data are we going to be able to look at to say, wow, this was super beneficial, or wow, this is a total waste of money? So that way we know what to do with it the next year if we decide to approve it this year.
You would, and we would provide, and you would, through this meeting, and so that we, and provide you the output and the reports that they do provide. So my intent is at least annually, or more often if we do mini surveys or polls, bring them to you. But at least annually, you would see results of the entire survey.
Historically have done surveys when we have town halls. You know, we've done a few surveys over the past year. Would that now be done through this new platform?
I believe it would, yes.
And how much did it cost us to do those surveys this past year?
those surveys. We use the Constant Contact platform. I don't recall what we have for that.
I don't think it was significant, probably.
Not this much, no. This is a much more robust platform. Without trying to be vendor specific, I can provide the council example of some of the data that you would see
Well,
process. So, yeah.
so that's my question. Is this something we would see? Because I don't think, I mean, unless there's an outcome coming from it, having more data doesn't always help. I mean, unless something's gonna happen from it, and we know what is having all this data do? Like, is there a plan as the city manager to respond to the data and adjust services? Or is it just, oh, well, that's interesting.
No.
For
Well, hopefully
15K?
some of both, but it should drive areas that potentially need more focus based on the outputs. You know, if we certain service that's increasing or decreasing in satisfaction for one reason or another, then that's an area that could potentially address either as a policy matter or, yes, potentially in the budget.
I have questions on some other areas of this. Where did this $10,000 figure come from for updating an employee handbook? That seems astronomically high.
So we did budget high for this. The previous year, I believe when we went out to look at this particularly, the bid amount that we received back was about $5,000, and that was about 4 years ago. So we are aiming high. We do hope to be under that budget. But that's where that number kind of came from.
And what is driving this? Like, why do we feel like we need to spend up to $10,000 to update a handbook? Is it that inadequate?
It was done. It was last done in 2006, so I would say yes, it's pretty inadequate.
Just because of the timing of it? I mean, have things changed so much? I don't know. I just think $10,000 for an employee handbook is crazy.
So I'm going to chime in on this simply because we do these, and $10,000 is not expensive for reviewing and updating a personnel policy that hasn't been updated since 2006. Federal law, federal employment law, state law has changed so much since then, and to go through that entire policy and do an update, especially normally there's a training component that goes with that, and we haven't been asked to do this, but we do these for cities all the time, and it's usually $10,000 would be pretty modest. I mean, regularly 15. So.
How many times have we attempted since 2006 to update the employee handbook? Because I think I've heard this brief about 5 different times since I've been on council. So what happened to all those other attempts and costs for updating the handbook?
So I believe there was an attempt made prior to me coming on, prior to 2019 with a full one. I don't know where that fell. I know it did not get finalized or approved. Since then, internally, we've tried to update policies kind of as we've gone. I believe in I don't want to say wrong, but in one of the previous years while I was here, we did request money for the legal review of one, and we just have not been able to complete the full update to get it to the legal review process. And so that's why we are currently requesting that we have outside assistance to do it.
Clearly, we've made multiple attempts with internal FTE to try to get this done, and it's just, I don't think you guys would have the capacity to do it, or else we would have done it.
Correct.
The 5 different times that I've heard you guys try to attempt this.
Yes.
Okay,
And a fair amount of that honestly is related to that communications component.
right. Okay.
Is there, and I'm just asking, is there a way that we could have somebody just review our employee handbook and tell us, without spending $10,000, you need a complete revamp of this? Or you don't need a complete revamp and there's just a few different areas in here that really need to be updated? So that way we know. I mean, is that a possibility to kind of maybe take it in two steps? Step one, do we really need this complete redo? Or can we just kind of tweak a couple little areas? And then if it comes back, yes, we need the whole redo, then we come back and do the whole redo.
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility. I think, again, as part of this overall budget request, I think that, as I've been saying internally, if I can get my HR director back focusing on HR, I think it will take a little longer, but if I can focus communications on communications and HR on HR, I think we can do a lot of it internally. It may not be quite as expedient as outsourcing it, if you will, but that would allow Joanna and team to have more capacity to do a lot more in-house, I think is what you're asking.
Mm-hmm. And is this what's driving this need for communications manager? I'm asking for the reason being, we restructured the department, I think, last year or year before. And Jennifer kind of became the communications person, correct? Or you became one of y'all was one and one was more the other, right?
So there are currently 3 members in my department. Last year, what we accomplished was we took, Jennifer was part-time for communications. I am still part-time also communications. We have our one full-time communications, and what we did last year was change Jennifer to a full FTE just in the HR role. And so that took the generalist position, but I do still rely pretty heavily on her for public relations events and assisting several times a year in communications. So while we did change her and we have provided her with more of those generalist duties, it still is a significant time item where every once in a while I do still have to pull into even what she's doing in her HR function to assist with some of our communications heavy items.
But you're right, council member, and that's in the memo I laid out for you all, which this is my request, is it's a communications manager position because, as I lay out, the communications function has blossomed considerably in the last few years. But really, I'm requesting that so that, yes, I can provide the bandwidth back to HR that's needed. So it is for communications to take on that role, but
And so
My
if
HR
we did
director back.
approve the FTE for communications manager, what would the structure look like at that point for Joanna and Jennifer?
my intent would be to make it.
Okay, so it would be then, where would you be?
So I would be on the HR side with Jennifer as the generalist, and then we would have the comms manager and Casey under the communications department.
So it would be 2 and 2, it'd be 2 in HR and 2 solely dedicated to communications, but wrapped into one department. Is that the idea?
I would split the department.
Oh, you split them, okay.
But 2 and 2, yes.
Right, okay. And right now, we have 1.5 dedicated to communications,
Probably more like 1 3/4, but yeah.
1 3/4.
Okay, thank you, council.
All right, I'll go over the finance proposed budget. So the department proposed budget totals almost $740,000. It's up 3.7% from last year. The expenditures are split almost 50-50 with the utility. There are some costs that are strictly for the general fund, such as the tax assessor collector fees and appraisal district fees. The department has 5 positions and currently no vacancies. Our newest employee, Keely Burnett, started last month as our accountant. Year over year, we have increases in personnel for merit and cost of living adjustment, increases in professional services for audit and appraisal district fees, an increase in training, and no change in our very small supplies budget. Those are the budget highlights I just talked about. There are no new budget requests for this fiscal year. And so that's really all I have to report for the Finance Department. Are there any questions? Okay, since I'm up here, I'll do the shared department. So that budget, proposed budget, totals a little over $750,000, which is a decrease of 49% from the prior year. That's mostly in transfers to the Strategic Projects Fund. 12% of the budget is allocated to the utility, and this is solely for general liability and property insurance. You can see the changes year over year. Again, mostly it's a decrease in the transfers as this current fiscal year we had a large transfer to the Strategic Action Plan Fund. And then there's no new budgetary items in this budget either. And the last department is Information Technology.
Good evening, Council. Brian Lejeune, IT Manager. So in reviewing the IT department budget, it's totaling $763,092. You'll see the IT department is staffed by 2 positions. It's mostly funded from the general fund at 59% and remaining through the utility fund at 41%. The majority of the costs are services at 54% of the budget that the entire organization utilizes. So it's things like Microsoft 365 and other services that are shared. In addition to that, that's also a component of the dues, subscriptions, and professional services, along with training. The shared services at 7% handles the copiers, security and fire monitoring, along with our telephone lines. Covering the comparison from last year, you'll see that we have an increase in personnel costs. Both services and shared services are down overall. Some capital plan for next fiscal year, which brings us to an overall increase of 2% in the total of the department. New items included in this proposed budget include the threat hunting, which is a third-party services, new endpoint protection to replace our existing one, a SIM, which stands for Security Information and Event Management software that will be installed on our server infrastructure, and replacement of items for our UPS or battery backup for our public safety and city hall buildings. Talking more detail about the threat hunting, this is a service provided to integrate with our environment in order to be on the lookout for indicators of compromise, preventions of phishing emails, preventive configurations which may implement to make our environment more safe and secure. Regular reviews of our environment with check-ins to ensure everything is running smooth, and included all with that is 30 hours of time to assist with responding to an incident should we ever need that. The SIM allows us to basically find the needle in the haystack. So coalescing all the logs that are generated from all of our systems, we have the ability to find all the important ones very quickly, rather than having to weed through all the noise. With the new endpoint protection, we will be replacing our existing services, which will also include some savings over what we're receiving today, along with mobile device protection. This service would implement safeguards outlined in advisories published by federal agencies and handle that within minutes of those advisories going out. Most of the decrease year over year in services is removal of the vulnerability study that we budgeted this year. We migrated all of our cell phone lines to a better plan and package, which resulted in $4,000 in savings. Our annual workstation replacement program for next fiscal year will cover $27,000. A couple of those are specialty machines that we had to build for GIS and IT. Finally, under requests not yet funded, we have some network infrastructure that will need to be replaced, totaling $76,349. We're handling this in a phased approach for our overall network infrastructure replacement, where all the end-of-life devices are addressed next fiscal year, and the remaining devices will be tied in with our server replacement program projected for FY 26. And if anyone has any further questions?
Brian, did you say that we talked about the workstation and now the network? Is that all on a life cycle replacement plan that we have?
Right. Yeah, on the workstations, we do a 5-year replacement, and on the servers, typically between 6 and 7.
Are we putting money away each year for that program, or is that?
We are now.
Okay.
So the two items that Mayor mentioned is for end of life, either workstations or network server, correct?
Well, so the workstations, that's our 5-year replacement cycle. On the network, we did it in a phased approach to where we're doing some this upcoming fiscal year, and then the fiscal year after that, so next budget cycle, we'll be putting that in for the server replacement.
But for the replacement now or projected, it's for items that are end of life?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any questions from anyone here tonight? All right.
Thank you, Council.
Got anything else we need on budget?
Nothing further tonight. More to come.
All right, guys, I have a quick question. These are kind of like summaries. Are we going to have the workshops or meetings where we actually go through the items? Okay.
At our meeting in July, you will hear the utility fund in totality, the capital improvements plan, and we'll wrap up with, in no particular order, city secretary and municipal court workshop. And then in August, we will have our I guess what we've taken to call our markup session.
All right. We'll move on to our next workshop item, which is a discussion of the closure of Noble Ark and Dietz Elkhorn intersection. So, Scott, what is it that we want to accomplish as part of this discussion tonight? So it's a workshop.
It is. So I don't want to steal Carol and Mike's thunder, but ultimately we are looking for direction from the council on whether or not we want to close or reopen Noble Ark, and what capacity. So the presentation will give you 5 potential options, a couple for each of those, and ultimately, whether tonight or soon, ideally before the school year starts next year, we'd like direction from the council on how we want to proceed with Noble
So
Ark.
do we want to open the road back up or close it?
That's question 1.
If we close it, at what capacity do we want to close it at?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure we understood where we're going before we start.
I think City Manager Wiesengay did a very well introduction. So I will let y'all know that after we closed it in late last year in December, we began working with our general engineering consultant to assess the impacts to the traffic flow since the closure of the road. We also asked them to help us to perform a traffic engineering study. That analysis, that final report, is in your packet in tonight's agenda, starting around page 234. Mike with Legacy Engineering Group is with us tonight, and he is going to summarize that report in his presentation. And as the city manager noted, the important takeaway is the recommendation as well as the 5 alternatives for you to consider and discuss. And after the presentation, I and my Public Works team will be here to help answer any questions you may have. So I will turn it over to Mike.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today again with you guys. As y'all know, I've been serving as the GEC for the city for almost 5 years now. I know this is a topic that's come up over the last 2 to 3 years since I've been serving in this role. So glad to present the results of the study to y'all today and kind of discuss options on how to move forward and hopefully get some good feedback from y'all in the community as well. Can y'all hear me okay? Sorry. Okay. So as Carol mentioned, just giving some quick background here on the study. Essentially in 2023 in September, we had a meeting to sit down and discuss actual traffic concerns with citizens. At that point, we had and if you read the actual workshop sheet, there's some other items in there that describe some of the meetings we had. There was a decision made by city staff to go ahead and temporarily close that connection to Dietz Elkhorn at Noble Ark in December, right as school let out. That gave us an opportunity as GC to come in starting in February and perform a more thorough analysis of what those impacts would be from the closure, and to try to assess, like we're talking about here today, what options we have to move forward. That's what we're here to present today. So real quick, looking at a study location map, and I realize it's late, I'll try to go through as quickly as possible, but stop me if you want to cover anything in more detail. But from a study location map, we assessed the areas from Old Fred Road at Dietz Elkhorn all the way east through the Square Gate intersection, of course, at the school, Noble Ark itself, where it hits Dietz Elkhorn, and to the east all the way down to the Parkway. Our study methodology included multiple project site visits. I think we have 4 or 5 documented within the report, but there was probably a good 10 to 12 that we took between myself and my staff. We conducted travel time runs, utilizing I-10 and Fair Oaks Parkway, pretty much where the CVS is at as our start point and ending at Van Braab Elementary School, and then working our way back as well to assess kind of an entering and exiting flow from an origin destination standpoint. We collected traffic data anywhere we could now, and then we also took data that we had from previous reports dating all the way back to 2021 where we had performed previous studies at some of these locations to try to optimize costs, if you will, on that data collection process. We also studied traffic operations at multiple intersections and utilized traffic simulation software called Synchro and SimTraffic to establish queuing along the corridor. Some key considerations I think everybody in the room should be aware of. Obviously, Van Braab Elementary School opened up in 2018, kind of changed traffic flow, if you will, for our community. I-10 also in 2020 was converted to a one-way frontage road system, which again made a major impact in how people travel throughout our community here. There's obviously traffic increases that we're seeing due to those changes, and also traffic increases that we're seeing due to the Lemon Creek development over towards Dietz Elkhorn Road at I-10. Something to think about here as we talk about this. In 2020, there was an always stop condition implemented at Dietz Elkhorn Road at Square Gate. I was part of that, working with you guys, and essentially the main factor there was protecting students that were walking to and from that area near the school. And then there was also, as I mentioned, the Noble Ark closure that was created for this particular assessment. We actually had about 20 minutes of video. We try to reduce it into a short clips here that you all can see. I'm not sure if you guys got links to the PowerPoint before, or if it's just a still image on your packets there. But essentially, we went and used we have a certified drone pilot at Legacy. We go out there multiple times during our site visits, and we try to get a bird's eye view of operations to correlate that back with the data that we're collecting and to try to better understand flow and operations and safety. So these are just some visual images we wanted to present really quick, just showing how we assessed operations at each of these intersections. We went up and down Noble Ark as we were assessing, in Calcalo, I should say, as we were assessing safety and flow and operations throughout the pre and post-closure analysis. I won't bore you with these details here. We just wanted to show you how our travel time analysis and our predictive analysis from a safety standpoint and travel time standpoint can be shown here. We analyzed, as I mentioned earlier, a starting point at I-10 and Fair Oaks Parkway and an end point at Van Braab, and just try to assess pre and post-closure impacts to ensure that we're fully encapsulating the potential impacts that the closure has on our citizens. When it came to alternatives considered, and there's a whole lot more detail in the report, but when it came to alternatives considered, we essentially narrowed it down to 5. A permanent closure, which is essentially leaving it as it is today, a reopening, if you will, back to the way it was before December, and then 2 unique alternatives here of converting it to like a southbound only movement. In other words, we have enough signs and documentation out there for people to realize that you're only going to go southbound. You cannot travel northbound towards Dietz Elkhorn. the kind of vice versa, if you will, of that, traveling northbound only. This would, of course, from a traffic standpoint, minimize the amount of flow through there, but doesn't necessarily provide the same benefits that we're looking for from a full closure from a safety standpoint. And then it says right in, right out, but essentially it's a right out only configuration, which I'll go over in a minute. We have an exhibit to show that. Alternative one, which is the permanent closure, just leaving it closed as it is today. We looked at some pros and cons, and this is, again, just a summary of our thorough analysis we conducted. From a pro standpoint, the number one pro, and I think we all know this as your civil engineer, for this community, our number one goal is to protect the safety and welfare of the traveling public and the citizens of our community. This particular pro is the number one pro for us, which is by restricting flow and the cut-through traffic that we're seeing, we can enhance the safety along Noble Ark Drive for the citizens living in that stretch. It also inherently prevents the cut-through flow that we're seeing through neighborhood streets, and it aligns with our city transportation plan. In other words, what we mean by that is we have roadways that are meant to be collectors, and we have roadways that are meant to be residential neighborhood streets, and Calcolo and Noble Ark were never meant to be major collectors. The cons are that we did see an increase in travel times and delays along our adjacent roadway infrastructure. It's pretty much common sense. The 200 to 300 people that we're cutting through at certain times have to find another route, and that makes traffic a little bit more impacted, if you will, at those other adjacent intersections. The other con is, in order to permanently close the structure, it would cost, depending on what we decide to do methodology-wise for that closure, it could create additional costs in the city. Alternative two is to reopen Noble Ark Drive, basically go back to the way it was before. The pro there is we would decrease travel times and delays on those collectors I previously mentioned. The cons are we're going to have that impact on safety for Noble Ark. We're going to have our greater impact on the roadway infrastructure that wasn't necessarily designed for that traffic loading. And we'll also have to potentially implement traffic calming devices to try to slow people down and create a safer environment along Noble Ark Drive. That cost for that is kind of unknown, but if we decide to go that route, we'd look at those traffic calming measures and how that would impact our budget. Alternative 3 and 4, they're very similar in nature. Essentially, creating a southbound or northbound only movement would reduce some of that cut-through volume, if you will. But the cons are, quite frankly, I'll summarize it really quickly. 3 and 4, from our standpoint, just aren't worth it. The potential of driver confusion, of someone not understanding the one-way flow, the potential of additional safety impacts, potentially having someone driving the wrong way and someone not paying attention and having a head-on collision, even though it's not supposed to be high speed. It's just, we saw that from a safety standpoint as not being something that we should move forward with. So alternatives 3 and 4, I'll move through fairly quickly, but there is an alternative 5 that we thought was interesting. This was brought up and staff asked us to take a look at this. Essentially a right out only at Noble Ark Drive. In other words, leave Noble Ark Drive as is. North-south movements are allowed. It's free flow both directions. However, at the intersection at Dietz Elkhorn, we would have a median island that channelizes right turns out only. If you're familiar with right here at Fair Oaks Ranch Elementary, as you're leaving the school, if you've driven that area in the morning, it has a right out and movement only. So you kind of have to head towards San Antonio, if you will. And it's fairly respected. Usually channelized medians are the best way to get people to respect that movement. Our fear with this potential option, which has some safety benefits, our fear is that when people make that maneuver, that they will essentially try to find the first place to turn around. And about 330, 340 feet downstream, there's a driveway there. And our fear is that people will use that to, there's not much room to make that turn, so it'll be like a 3-point maneuver. And we're afraid that someone will be potentially T-boned there as they try to stop and turn around and get back to the west. So it's not something we decided to move forward with as a recommendation. Other special considerations, front gate obviously is a gated community, but we noticed a lot of folks using that as a cut-through movement as well, especially now that Noble Ark is closed. We saw a lot of people using, with our drone footage, using the neighborhood to get through just to drop off at Van Rob. We know that there are some traffic operation concerns at Square Gate. We've seen the queues during peak periods. However, considering that there's not a security guard or crossing guard there right now, and you can see here on this drone footage, you can see the pedestrians, the groups of pedestrians that are using this and crossing. we stand by the recommendation of leaving that as a four-way stop, unless I just heard earlier that there may be some funding for a crossing guard. That would be awesome, to be able to get people safely across, or kids safely across this intersection. Another special consideration, of course, is the Lemon Creek development and the impact that's going to have on traffic flow on Deeds Elkhorn, regardless of what we do on Noble Ark. And last but not least, we understand the Fair Oaks Parkway intersection. If you look at the report and look at some of the level of service results, there's an F there already, with or without any of our options. So that's something we've been talking about for a long time. I think the full duration, I've been with y'all. We've talked about the level of service at Fair Oaks Parkway.
Wondering if you were going to fit this in this presentation somehow.
No, I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything.
Literally every time.
I didn't say anything.
I know you didn't say it, but I know what you're getting at.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I'll
move on. I'll move on.
Okay. Every time.
So our recommendation based on our analysis at this time, and ultimately I just want to make it very clear, it's a workshop. We're looking for input. We're looking for direction y'all want to move forward in. I'm just trying to present the results of our analysis, and staff did ask us from our standpoint to present a recommendation. And at this point, our recommendation is to permanently close Noble Ark Drive at Deeds Elkhorn Road. The primary reasons for that being the operational impacts of the closure, we did not see to be significant enough to outweigh the safety benefits that we receive as a community. I think we averaged about, I think it was 14 total travel times, and the largest average we got from all that was about 30 seconds. So 30 seconds of convenience, if you will, compared to somebody potentially losing their life is just not worth it from our perspective. The closure supports the city's transportation plan in UDC, as I mentioned earlier. It supports the fact that we're trying to send more traffic to our collectors versus our neighborhood streets. And the peak queues, even though some of those drone videos that you saw, they do show long lines, it's important to note that in all those scenarios that we analyzed, there was never more than 10 minutes of that queue. It eventually dissipated down, and things operated at a better level of service very quickly. So it is bad during that initial school peak period, pick up and drop off times, but it gets better really quickly. So that's important to note. That being said, if you decide to move forward with the closure, one of the things that we've talked about with staff is most of the closures that we've seen, at least myself in my career, the more people respect them, the more permanent structurally they are, the less problems you'll have from a maintenance standpoint, from a safety standpoint. That being said, we're just trying to present you all with some options. There are a few options here that you could potentially be looking at, and some ballpark costs based on some high-level estimates that we ran. But essentially, the most cost-effective solution that would achieve the results at the lowest price for y'all would be something similar to what we have in other parts of the community, which would be just boulders through there preventing access. The only con there is that from a safety standpoint, if someone's not paying attention and they're not used to that, if you don't have the right signage, they could run into those structures. If you wanted to do it, obviously no one has a blank checkbook, but if you wanted to do it completely the safest way possible, you would have a permanent wall or structure, and you'd have some sort of a turnaround or hammerhead structure. Obviously that cost goes up. It's a little bit more impact on the community. From a safety standpoint with emergency services, there are options that we could place in, like an emergency gate that has a knock box that would allow emergency services to open that when they need to. We found a recent estimate of around $5,000 for something like that. Ignore the picture, that's not exactly what it would look like, but a structure like that would cost roughly $5,000. And that being said, it's up to y'all at the end of the day to do what you want to do. We're just here to present the results and answer any questions. So let me know, and we won't talk about the R word. Promise.
I just do have one question. I know it wasn't presented. I just want to bring it up. I think I read it in our packet. The fire and police were asked about the closure, correct? And was there any concerns that they brought up? How about I say that?
There was no concerns.
Okay.
Ma'am.
So, the right turn only was something that I talked about with Scott, and the idea behind the right turn only was it allows the street to have access to it for an emergency situation. If the police or fire needed to get there, sometimes 30 seconds is the difference between life and death. So they don't have to go all the way around. They could somehow access that street. Another reason for the right turn only is the folks who live on Noble Ark and in that area, the students there go to Fair Oaks Elementary. If we allow them to exit to go down Dietz, as opposed to also funneling through Fair Oaks Parkway, that would also help eliminate some of that traffic that now has to go Fair Oaks Parkway or access road to get to Van Rob. So it would help alleviate some of that morning traffic or afternoon traffic, because those folks could just funnel out to Dietz and go straight over to Fair Oaks Elementary School. And then for people who may just want to access the club or whatever, which is far fewer people, but still provides that access for that reason. So that's why I brought that up.
I've gone down that same thought process as you have, and I also like that as an option. I don't think closing off a road totally ever solves the problem. I think we worry about issues with cars turning around, and we just give up on the idea that we can modify behaviors with some really well-placed traffic enforcement. And when people realize that they're going to get a ticket that's going to be enforced, we can change that behavior. I don't think closing it off all the time is always the best idea. I know we're studying it. I don't know it's not knee-jerk, but I think that this hammerhead idea will also work to alleviate that through traffic problem that people are concerned about. My 2 cents.
Well, so let's go back to the first question. Do we want to take some action to keep Noble Ark closed?
I'm still in favor of fully closing off the road for all the reasons that our paid general engineering consultant who did a 100-page study said.
I was just trying to, we had several options of how to close it. Is everybody in favor of taking some action to close it?
Taking some action, yes. Yeah.
I would be in favor of the partial opening.
I'm
So,
just
or
asking
partial
some
closing.
action. Are y'all in favor of doing some action?
Some action.
Okay. We'll get to the action. Yes, ma'am. Do you have a?
My biggest concern, I'm sorry.
Could you, please?
So, hi, I'm Viv Serrano. I live off of right at Kakalo and Noble Ark. I'm right at that intersection, right across the street. So my biggest thing is that I have small children who ride the bus, and the pickup is right there in front, and they have 2 different pickups. Regardless of being closed, and what it is that I've had my child almost hit several times because people do not yield at that intersection right there. And so my child has almost gotten hit, and my husband, we've tried to locate these vehicles, trying to figure out who's doing it, but to me, it's just safety. My biggest thing, we have a lot of small children, and now, I think from the new homeowners, we have more smaller children, and these kids are little, and my little girl has almost gotten hit by these drivers coming through fast. I'm not saying all drivers, but my daughter has almost gotten hit. And so my biggest thing is that yield sign going down. They're zooming super quick. They're in a hurry, trying to get their kids to school. And so it needs to be, there needs to be something put in place to where those drivers cannot be going through there as fast. And it's not even only during school hours. We've had people in a rush going to the club or going somewhere. They're just rushing really quick. And so, and it's the FedEx guys. They've slowed down a lot, UPS. But my biggest concern for me is the children. If you go to I have 2 big old yellow signs that say slow down. It doesn't stop. They still zoom by. And we're just trying to protect our children. That's the biggest concern.
This was prior to the trial closure that we did.
Oh, yes, before the trial closure. Right now, it's been awesome. It's been amazing. My kids are able to go outside, enjoy it. Even when the bus was coming up, it wasn't a big deal because I didn't have those cars zooming fast, going to school, hurrying up, trying to get their kids to school or going to Van Rob, but my little one rides the bus, and she's almost been hit several times there trying just to get on the bus. And so I'm just trying to figure out a way to make sure that that road can be safe, you know, safe for my kids and all the other kids in our neighborhood, just to make sure that it could be safe for them.
You're in favor of continuing some type of program to close the road?
To close the road, yes. We want it closed because of that. Safety for our children. We have a lot of small kids in that neighborhood, and nobody knows how to drive. They see a yield sign, automatic, it's just like, they just keep going. They don't even stop and yield. It just keep going, and they go super fast. They don't go, it's what, 35 miles per hour? That's pretty quick too when you're trying to get somewhere. And so if they would lessen the mileage, yes, I could see that, but still, it's closing it is gonna benefit the neighborhood because of the kids. We have small little ones. We have a lot of little ones now, so.
Thank you. So from the 6 of us that are here, I think we've indicated that we'd like to move forward with some type of closer action. So Mike kind of provided us, you know, one way northbound, one way southbound. And so, yeah, and just kind of, I know he kind of ruled them out, but just to kind of rule them out, if we're really looking at, you know, what the problem is, which is cut through traffic, honestly, I don't know, Mike, what y'all looked at, but I believe that the most of the traffic that is using the through on Calcalo or on Noble Ark are cars coming from outside the city.
We were able to confirm that, yes.
Yeah, you know, if we had a small number of residents that are using it, I think it's like 20 that go to Van Rob from within the city, that there's probably in the neighborhood of 150 from outside the city that use that route to travel to Van Rob. And then also mentioned was that throughout the day, you still have other people that are traveling through the cut-through. Point being is, if you were to make the road one way, you solve the problem in one direction. But you're still not solving the total issue, I believe.
I have a question about the ride out only. For that Rays Island, have there, not for this study, but have there been any studies on that sort of island directing traffic right, statistically, whether people disregard it and just turn left from the intersection anyway?
So we actually thought about trying to perform a study here within our community at Fair Oaks Ranch Elementary. Obviously, school was towards the end when we got to that point in our analysis about a month ago. They were already letting out Bernie ISD. We thought about adding that as a supplemental analysis later to see who actually respects it. I know that my son and daughter used to attend here, and I know for every car I saw pulling out right, everyone pretty much abided by that, and it's kind of crazy in the morning anyway. You can't really see with people coming in and queuing and stuff, but a lot of folks would turn around at the first driveway right past the school to the south, to a point where they'd pull in and just wait on the shoulder until there was a gap and then turn around. So I'm pretty sure if we did conduct that analysis, we'd see a decent amount of folks obeying the law, but then later on breaking it downstream.
So if we eliminate the one way northbound, one way southbound, what we left is total closure or right turn only. Are there any other options that anybody would like to offer, or? And does the right turn only solve our problem?
I will say in the perfect world, if everyone obeys the law and follows that right turn only, there should be zero cut through heading towards Van Rob. And that eliminates 95% of the problem that we saw. There's a lot of cut through traffic associated directly with the school. So if you no longer can make that movement, theoretically, yes, it should help significantly.
Shouldn't be anybody off the Parkway that would be doing a cut through where you'd have to do a right turn only on Dietz, and it'd put you right back at the Parkway.
Exactly.
Okay.
I like the idea of it, but I've also dropped off my kids for years with something that was right turn only, and 50% would find, they would just turn right and then turn left. Like they would just come right past there, get in the middle of the road, and actually just take a left.
So you can eliminate that with those poles, right? So you just have a small portion of the roadway. They're like poles that, they're permanent structures, so you can't do that.
No, like literally driving into the road, like.
Right, I understand
you
what
put
you're
a
saying.
pole in the road?
Yes. In the,
In the
so like
middle of the road.
if you've driven down Blanco Road, for example, out like near Campbellis, right? They have those.
Oh, I see what
Like,
you're saying. They're not poles, they're just.
In the
They're
median.
sticks.
They're called
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm
delineators.
like, I mean, okay.
They're like, you know, whatever, I don't know.
I was trying to
4
understand
feet
what
high.
you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I see.
Eliminators.
Yeah.
Are you talking about putting them in the middle of the road or
Dividers.
on?
Right,
In the
right.
middle.
You would have them like yellow, they would be colored yellow so that they understand that, you know, or white.
But that doesn't stop them from
Right.
turning around further up the road.
Further
which-
down, it wouldn't, but right there, it would prevent people from going, meow, meow, you know.
Yeah, I
And I don't think, I think that, I personally think that most people are gonna abide by the law, especially knowing that it's school hours and that traffic is heavy, right? I think the times that you would have that would be maybe people wanting to go to, HEB or something at a different time of day. There's going to be more traffic there anyways. I don't think that if there's only a 30-second time difference, I don't think that they're gonna chance doing that and blowing their 30 seconds and getting a ticket.
Yeah, and so I appreciate you thinking of other options. However, I sat in this room with every resident of this community and asked them to their face, do you care if this is closing? I know it's going to be an inconvenience. And they said, we want it closed. We'd rather have it closed and make it an inconvenience to us, including the 2 houses sitting there and all of the residents in that entire neighborhood. So we're solving a problem that the residents don't even think is an issue.
I don't believe this was an option though at that time. So
Right, but I asked them that. I asked them, if there's another option, is this going to be too inconvenient for you? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Or would you mind?
My name's George Geiser. I live at the corner of Calcala and Fair Oaks Parkway. I built my house in 1990. That street, Calcala, was never made to be a major thoroughfare and dump all of the kids' traffic going to Van Rob. It's an inconvenience for us when we want to go the back way to go to HEB to come up and go the other way. Well, we're all willing to make that sacrifice. So keep it closed.
So here's a question. We've done this temporary total closure. What if we did a temporary right turn only to see what happens? He just said it would eliminate 95% or more of the cut-through traffic, which is what is the concern.
When you're living in that section right there, it's just as easy to drive to the parkway, go down the parkway. You're not gaining any time going to Deeds Elkhorn and trying to go down Deeds Elkhorn to the parkway.
I think one of the primary reasons of having the right turn only would it allowed emergency vehicle access through Noble Ark.
Which
And I
was
think-
a major concern.
But we did ask them, and they said there was no concern. So I'm just thinking we're trying to solve problems that no one has brought forward as actual issues. I know some people don't want the road closed, but all the neighborhood here, the study says it, the police don't have a concern, the fire don't have a concern, the residents don't have a concern with it being closed right there. So I don't know what we're trying to solve by another solution.
I think I think it provides a very good compromise here to protecting people from speeding through there during the school hours, but also keeping it open, which would allow for a decrease in traffic on the parkway during these high peak hours. And it would allow access for emergency personnel if it was ever needed. If it was my child choking and that 30 seconds made a difference between their life and death, I sure would want them to be able to access that.
Yeah, but they don't go that way normally.
Is the emergency gate to allow emergency vehicles in cheaper than the raised island?
I believe so, yes. I think it was 5,000 versus 7,500 was our estimate.
Well,
Yes.
If it has that emergency, like little beacon, they could just push that button
It's-
and it would open
Yeah,
for
there'd be a
them, just like all the other
priority
gates.
detection where they click it and it would open and they
Yeah.
can service anything.
Emily, you brought up the point, could we do a temporary solution? And I was kind of going that direction, but the point that Laura brought up is if you try to put something like this in, you have to have some means to keep people from turning left. Because if you don't have police there monitoring it, people are going to go up to the intersection, they're going to turn left.
Well, maybe, I mean, we do it at Fair Oaks Elementary School. That's my point. If we try it, let's see, do
Well, I was
people
thinking
really
we
do
could even
that?
use the white poles and do it right there, force people to go right. But the challenge I ran into is that if you're not monitoring it, people are going to turn left. And if you put the poles down the center of the road, now emergency vehicles can't make the turn.
They can, they would be coming through the oncoming for a short distance, but they would still be able to access it. And the poles aren't gonna go all the way down to the parkway.
The only problem with adding delineators on the center median is our roadway's pretty narrow, so people tend to kind of not pay attention all the time. They may be on their phones or whatever, and they get beat up really quick, and they become a pretty expensive cost to repair them consistently. So that's my fear of putting them in the center line. You typically want to have a buffer space of at least 2 to 3 feet before someone hits them. In our situation, I mean, anybody can hit them driving up and down Deeds. It'd be pretty tight. I guess I just want to add that for delineators in the center, along the center stripe. Now, I hear what you're saying. If you put them on the outside and you're kind of forcing people to follow that and make a right, that could potentially work, but you're going to have to add some additional pavement there to build that up. So it could be a little more costly.
Yeah, Keith.
I know I was in a meeting with some residents on this issue, and the topic of emergency response came up, and I believe the Chief had some data, and I think from that meeting, it was determined that that road's really not, it's, as Laura said, you can't go fast enough. In fact, it's not a road that emergency services would typically use to get to the school and doesn't provide them any additional speed or access. So I think that, although that's come up a lot, I'm not sure that's a real practical concern when we've already, as he said, we already talked to the fire chief, we've already talked to the police services, the ambulance services, and we've had a couple instances since this road was closed where they had to respond, I believe, to the issue at the school at that time. And their response was they were there within what, 1 minute, chief, right? And so had the SRO on site, so we really didn't have any benefit for Calcalo and Noble Ark to be open for a route for emergency services. So that's the information I've received on that.
I was kind of, coming in tonight, I was kind of in favor of trying to find some temporary solution to look at right turn only. But as we go through it right now, I'm looking at this, and I just don't think it solves the problem.
I don't think we know.
If we're not solving the problem that we have with safety within Noble Ark and Calcalo, then why are we taking those actions? And one issue that I looked at for doing right turn only is it allowed emergency vehicles to access the neighborhood, but I don't know that it's really needed. There's probably one point in the whole city that it would be longer for them to go all the way around versus doing Noble Ark and Calcalo.
You're correct. So unless the emergency vehicle or the officer was right there at that intersection and they had to go just to that opposite side, it's probably the only time that you're going to get any type of benefit from cutting through. So, which is pretty rare. So,
From my standpoint looking at it, I just think the right way to go is we'll do the permanent closure of the road.
Like the gate option, because there is that option to open it up in the case of there's
Siren, yeah.
significant situation where we actually have to use it for some reason. And it could have an emergency thing just in case, like maybe the house right there has an emergency breaker, but,
Sir?
My name is Mark Freeberg, and I live 4 houses in from Dietz on Noble Dark, and I don't want to belabor the points because y'all are having a long meeting. I can't speak to the emergency access, but just from a personal data point, before the closure, I took my kids to school every morning down Dietz because that's the closest road to me. We use Dietz for everything. Since the closure, the impact on us has been negligible. I take my kids to school every morning at 7:15. When we use Dietz, we get there around 7:20. I take them every day now at 7:15. We use the Parkway, and we get there about 7:20, 7:21. And it's just so, from a personal data point, a right turn only doesn't give us much from a convenience factor, from the timing. I can't speak to the other issues, but I just want to tell you that that's my personal experience since the closure. Daily activities, same ones every time.
That's a good point. Thank you, sir. Still like the right turn option?
Me too.
I'm not. I don't think, no, I'm for the closure, but I don't think the right turn only will get what we want.
Full closure.
I think the full closure of some manner would be the appropriate solution. And the gate's a good idea, I mean, to Laura's point, I mean, but everybody we've talked to said it doesn't provide any additional access for emergency services, so what are we trying to solve? You know, why are we trying to solve that problem when all the data, you know, points to the fact that road's too curvy to go fast anyway, and it's not the route they would take anyway? Why are we trying to solve for emergency services, have another access point? So to me, when I make decisions, I like to look at data and impacts, and we've got all that. We've got the entire report here, and, you know, the recommendations are here, and the recommendations, you know, are pretty solid. We've got 5 options, and I think we've discussed, you know, a couple of them not being there. The northbound, southbound don't make sense. But I just feel like it's, we got it in front of us, and what are we going to do with it, is my question. And it's been, what, since last fall we've been assessing this. So it's not like something that's come along in a short period of time. We've had lots of comments from residents. We've had meetings, I've been in meetings, you've been in meetings with residents pro and con, and now we got a report, so I think it's time for us to make a decision.
Well, can I just chime in one more time? Just because I know Laura loves this topic. We have also had reports that say roundabouts are really great. So just because a report says something is really great doesn't always mean it's really great. So I'm just throwing that out there, that I think I appreciate all the work that has gone into this. But I do think that we have to consider that there are a lot of folks in our community that really want it to stay open to some degree. There are a lot of folks in the community that really want it to be closed. And I think having a right turn only, if it cuts down on these cut-throughs by 95%, I just don't see why that wouldn't be something that we would be in favor of, because it pretty much provides the best of both worlds for our residents. And I think that that's going to be something that everybody can appreciate to some degree, as opposed to one set of residents being really, really happy and the other being really, really upset about it, when there's not a huge downside to this. And so that is why I am in favor of having this right turn only. I think it provides a very good, successful compromise for everybody.
Yeah, I think, aren't we just addressing how we're going to do it, and that really where we're at this juncture? Or do we need to take two steps, Mayor?
What do you need, Scott?
Well, so tonight we're looking for direction. Ultimately, what we'll have to do, based on the discussion, is, I believe, at least consider an action to close the road, and that's in the form of an ordinance. Permanent closure has to be in an ordinance. Step to at least that action, and pass as we take it from there, and then we look at how we're going to close it.
So if right turn only, is that a permanent closure?
Does that require an ordinance?
Attorney, I believe it does not.
What I was trying to figure is the next step. Is it worth? Emily's got some points, but as I look at it, are we just trying to leave the road open for happy? But I don't know that there's any purpose in the right turn only.
Well, it provides a different avenue of access, right? I mean, you can still go to other parts of the city that way.
The only people that would use it should be the Noble Art Calcalo residents.
Well, maybe not. I mean, it could be other folks that will use it for that way, which I understand creates an issue. But it's not the issue that we have been presented with over and over again. It's not the folks that come through every now and then to go to the club or to go somewhere else in the city. And again, if you look at the flip side of that, Greg, if people aren't really going to access it to go right turn only anyways, then what's the harm?
My concern is it would get abused. People would use it for the left turn. I don't know that you could put the traffic control measures on Dietz Elkhorn to force people not to make a left turn. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't recommend any sort of delineation in the center median, but you could build like an acceleration lane and have delineators that force people to make a right. Again, been doing this for a long time. My fear is I agree 100%. If enforcement's there and people are respecting it, theoretically it should work. I fear for the other, half the time that enforcement's not there, I fear for the risk that it presents of someone taking advantage of it. And I know you mentioned it, Mayor. One of the interesting items we received from the school, and we didn't put it in the report because there's information about addresses and students and whatnot, but we are able to see where the students are coming from, what neighborhoods, if you will, and a lot of those folks are not citizens of Fair Oaks Ranch. So I think that's a very important fact as well to remember.
Sam?
Real quick, I just wanted to say, we are the last, our street ends Fair Oaks Ranch, like the whole city. So where we end, that's where it ends where we go to Fair Oaks Ranch Elementary School. So if anything, we would be the one utilizing that, like you said, that street more. Everyone would use Fair Oaks Parkway. There's no way, they wouldn't come through us just to cut through to go to the club that way. They would go straight through Fair Oaks Parkway to go to the club. So really, no one's gonna utilize it if you're gonna be turning right. Everyone's gonna wanna try to go, their main thing is going the opposite way to go to the school or now to HEB. So that's really the biggest, they're gonna be wanting to go the other way. No one else is gonna use that street but us in the neighborhood if you see it that way, because we're the end of the city, the last street of the city. So I just had to say that, just mention it, that we were the last street and no one else would use it, so. I'd at least like to see an ordinance come to vote.
Yeah.
Yes. That way, we'll be forced to make a decision one way or the other and have this discussion again. Maybe during that time frame, we could take a look at the right turn option. I don't know if Mike or from staff, but they have the information. Exactly what you mentioned, and then if it's really for emergency vehicles, I think the measures you would have to put in to keep people from turning left would also prevent emergency vehicles from turning left at that location. I mean, if everybody just abide by the rules, right? If everybody just obey rules, we could put up no through traffic signs and we'd be done. Wouldn't it be that simple? Okay. Well, next step, let's take a look at an ordinance to totally close the road.
Back, that helps, thank you.
To have which type of way we're closing it in that ordinance, or is that a more of an operational thing after the fact?
So for ordinance purposes, we need type of closure.
That's a whole nother topic.
Okay. Got everything you need.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Mike. Y'all
Thank
did
you.
a great job presenting the information. Pretty challenging topic. So, and thanks, council, for independent thinking and bringing up the different perspectives.
That was
It's really what makes us good is to hear the independent comments from everybody else to make us all consider all the possibilities. So thanks.
I agree.
Even thought of that one. That was,
We can agree to disagree.
happens sometimes. Yeah.
All right, Clayton, we gonna talk trash?
Put a roundabout.
We are. I'm Clayton Holscher. Good evening. I'm Clayton Holscher. I'm the procurement manager with the finance department. Tonight's, what we're doing is just giving a quick, high level, not getting too much into the specifics, but we really wanted to just give you an update on how things are progressing with our request for proposals for our solid waste collection and recycling services. So just as a quick recap, on April 4th, the city staff presented Republic Services renewal proposal, and at that time, the decision was made to go forth with a request for proposals. At the April 18th meeting, we provided a draft request for proposals for input, and then on April 23rd, we issued that request for proposals. We had those due on May 21st, and as a result of that, we ended up with proposals from the 5 companies you see there: Republic Services, Tiger Sanitation, Texas Pride Disposal, Frontier Waste Solutions, and Waste Connections Lone Star, Inc. We had an evaluation team that reviewed the proposals, and we interviewed multiple firms. And as part of the review process, we're looking at key components for how they can handle the job, and all the components of the project or of the service. So we're looking at things like price, so any sort of potential rate increases, how that would affect citizens in future years, the availability and location of staff and equipment, their fleet, their backup fleet, how old it is, what type of shape it's in, where things would be stored and maintained, their experience in serving communities, HOAs, cities, counties, things of that nature, and all the resources they have available for customer service. And then if we were to switch to a new provider, if they would be able to provide a seamless transition. So we really asked for a lot of information. We interviewed multiple firms and really went into the details on their service. So as where we stand right now, we've got negotiations ongoing with the top-ranked companies. We're not looking at any reductions in service for residents. That's not part of this. As part of the RFP process and the negotiations, we're just looking into not only maintaining, but any sort of way we can enhance the features to provide any sort of flexibility for the citizens. What we're planning on doing is continuing to negotiate a franchise agreement and then bringing that to the July 18th council meeting for approval. So that would require an ordinance, which would require a second reading, which we would plan to bring at the August 8th meeting. So as we are right now, we've gotten some good proposals, we've reviewed them, and we're just in negotiations, so things are moving. And I'm happy to answer any sort of questions that you might have.
Any comments or questions? All right.
Process.
Thanks, Clayton.
Sure, thank you.
Well, that includes all the items that we had on the agenda for tonight. Do any council members have any announcements that they'd like to make? July 4th? Yeah, I got that one. Firehouse Open House.
Oh, yeah.
Want to talk about that?
Sure. Saturday, 10 a.m., I think it's till 2. There's an open house at the Ralph Fair Road Firehouse. So it's Station 132. There'll be our police department there, the fire department will be there, Acadian, and it sounded like, as I saw from social media this morning, a helicopter will be coming and landing there, so you can see the emergency air medical services as well. And it should be a good community type of get-together. So I think they also wanted to kind of show off some of their new ambulances that they have, so that was part of their
What time is it?
10 to 2-ish. Yeah. If you talk to my husband, he'll let you send the siren. Yeah. Okay.
First announcement that I had, City has partnered with the Country Club again this year for our July 4th celebration. The event will be held on the evening of July 4th on the driving range at the Country Club. Festivities will be fairly similar to last year's. I know that we've made some improvements, but you can start showing up at 6 p.m. Fireworks are scheduled to go off starting at dark. Our annual road maintenance program has kicked off, so you will see crews throughout the city. It runs through July 18th. Be careful of, we'll have crews out on the roads as we're driving around. Also, GVTC will be installation of the fiber optic cable network soon. Mainly, they're going to start at the intersection of Fair Oaks Parkway and Ralph Fair Road, and then they will move along the parkway towards the Country Club. But that should begin soon also, so there'll be another set of construction crews out on the road. And our next council meeting will be held on July 18th. The council meeting that we had scheduled for July 4th, we canceled. And so we'll only have one meeting in the month of July, and that'll be on July 18th. So we get 4 weeks till the next meeting. Enjoy
But we
it.
might see each other at the 4th of July celebration.
And the Firehouse Open House, and we get to see each other, but just.
Don't talk business.
What are you talking about? Scott, any other announcements or?
Nothing unless you have questions for me.
Not at all. Are there any items that any council member would like added to a future agenda? Yes, ma'am.
I had a meeting with some of the Chartwell folks, and we discussed possibly bringing up at a future meeting, setting up a committee for folks across the city to be a part of when we start discussing the civic center or community center. And so I wanted to bring that up for a possible future council meeting to discuss the creation of that committee.
It's really related to the policy around the.
Right, correct.
Okay. Anybody else? Christina, is there anything else that we need tonight?
Yes, sir.
Anything we missed, or? Scott, anything from your end?
Good here, thank you.
All right, I have the time now is 9:29, and we are adjourned.